The Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's territory is ahead. Should we first leave the Crimson Sky Kingdom and pass through the border between the Crimson Sky Kingdom and the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom before discussing that expert? Tang Hua took a deep breath and glanced at the direction of the Crimson Sky Kingdom's imperial city as he spoke with slight fear. Tang Hua's words caused Zhao Ming and Zhong Lin to be unable to refrain from shaking their heads. Zhao Ming was just about to mock Tang Hua when Zhong Lin had already spoken out before him. Tang Hua, you're really getting worse and worse. Undeniably, that expert is indeed extremely strong. But the place we're at now is extremely far away from the Crimson Sky Kingdom's imperial city. Could it be that you think that expert is able to know that we haven't left the Crimson Sky Kingdom? Zhao Ming nodded and deeply agreed. Tang Hua laughed in self-ridicule when he heard this, and he felt that perhaps he was really too sensitive. Even if it was an expert at the void transformation stage or above, it would probably be impossible for the expert to traverse such a long distance to monitor them, unless the expert was really bored to the point of following them. But, was this possible? Tang Hua asked himself, and the three of them ought to not have such great face. Right at this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly condensed into form in the sky and descended onto the three of them, causing the expressions of the three of them who'd just caught their breaths to instantly go pale. This aura was too familiar to them. Say, Senior. Tang Hua's face was ghastly pale. Earlier, he was still thinking that the expert that guarded the Crimson Sky Kingdom ought to not go to the extent of following them. But now it would seem that the facts weren't so. It was very likely that the expert was following behind them and monitoring them to see if they would obediently leave. Yet now, they didn't obediently leave. A trace of despair arose within his heart. Zhao Ming and Zhong Lin had similar feelings, the latter had a regretful expression. The former glared at the latter instead, and seemed to have completely forgotten that his thoughts earlier were the same as Zhong Lin's. Looks like the three of you have taken my words to be like the wind passing by one's ears. Since it's like this, then I can only give all of you a slight punishment and allow all of you to properly remember. A cold and indifferent and hoarse voice seemed to sweep over from all directions. For a time, the atmosphere in the entire sky became slightly strange. Senior, spare me, spare me. Tang Hua's face was ghastly pale as his body shivered. Although that formidable aura didn't completely suppress him, he didn't dare make the slightest movement. He knew clearly in his heart that if he dared flee, then he would die without a doubt. This was something he didn't doubt in the slightest. Senior, spare me. Zhao Ming and Zhong Lin's expressions were extremely unsightly, and their eyes were filled with boundless terror. Before today, they practically didn't dare believe it. Tang Hua suddenly thought of a problem, and a wisp of worry appeared on his face. Humph. The matter of the 10,000-year stalactite milk should wait until that Duan Lingtian leaves the Crimson Sky Kingdom and we can capture him. Otherwise, everything is only a dream. Zhao Ming grunted. Elder Ming, the matter of the 10,000-year stalactite milk, Tang Hua looked at Zhao Ming and spoke with a serious expression. But he hadn't finished speaking when he was interrupted by Zhao Ming. Don't worry. I'm not stupid to the point of sharing the 10,000-year stalactite milk with others. The fewer people that know about this matter, the more beneficial it is to us. A certain amount of 10,000-year stalactite milk is required to be able to assist us in improving our natural talent to the limit. Tang Hua hadn't finished speaking when Zhao Ming guessed his thoughts. Earlier, that Zhong Lin almost trapped us. But, it's good that he's dead. We can have one less person to share the 10,000-year stalactite milk with. Chapter 486. It can be said that this opportunity. To you and our Crimson Sky Kingdom, it's a win-win opportunity. Nye Fen's words were filled with confidence towards Duan Lingtian. He believed that with Duan Lingtian's natural talent and strength, he would surely be able to stand out in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom and obtain the qualifications to head to the Darkstone Empire's Imperial City to compete with the young experts of the various Darkstone Empires and Imperial Kingdoms. Once Duan Lingtian was able to continue to stand out in the Darkstone Empire, Duanling Tian would be able to head to the Darkhan dynasty's capital and compete with the young geniuses of the Darkhan dynasty and the various empires to compete for the qualifications to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. It could be imagined that the young experts that were able to obtain the qualifications to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties would surely be the most outstanding monstrous geniuses of the various dynasties. The martial competition of the 10 dynasties was a competition between the group of young geniuses that stood at the peak of the 10 dynasties. At that time, it would be another fierce struggle. If one was able to stand out in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, one would even have the chance to join a power of the foreign lands. The words foreign lands held great weight and firmly suppressed the various dynasties. Then the martial competition of the 10 dynasties doesn't have specific requirements? Duanling Tian asked curiously. Supposedly, the people that participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties can't exceed 40 years of age. They must be of the true younger generation. Otherwise, even if they seize the qualifications to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, their qualifications to participate would be directly revoked in the end. Nye Yuan spoke slowly. In other words, the young geniuses of the various dynasties that are preparing for the martial competition of the 10 dynasties can't exceed 35 years of age. After all, even if they're only 35 years old now, they'll be 40 years old 5 years from now. Duanling Tian's brows raised. Can't exceed 40 years of age? Actually, we don't really understand this as well, Nye Fen said with a smile. Generally speaking, people under the age of 40 are collectively referred to as youths. However, there are many people over the age of 40, such as Uncle Ru Feng, people around the age of 50, who maintain themselves well and appear to be only around the age of 30. When he spoke up to hear, Nye Fen glanced at Nye Yuan and smiled. Unlike my father. What? You little brat, you dare complain that your father is old? Nye Yuan glared at him and shouted in a low voice. Nye Fen instantly shriveled up when he heard this. Father, I was joking. Big brother Nye Fen. Duanling Tian instead declined to comment on what Nye Fen said. I've seen a record in an ancient book. Supposedly, there's a miraculous ore in the foreign lands that, after being polished, can become an age-measuring pearl. As long as a person puts their hand on the age-measuring bead, the age-measuring bead will have a reaction, and ribbons will appear. For example, if a newborn child touches the age-measuring bead, a faint red ribbon will appear, indicating that the child is under 1 year old. When a child is 1 year old, one red ribbon will turn dark. If a child is 2 years old, 2 red ribbons will appear. At the age of 10, you will have 10 red ribbons. Later on, when older people touch it with their hands, different colored ribbons will appear, representing different ages. All this Duanling Tian spoke of was naturally not something he saw in an ancient book. The reason he knew of this was because there were records of the age-measuring pearl in the memories of the Samsara Emperor Wu. The age-measuring pearl was able to measure a person's age. Of course, the age-measuring pearl wasn't all-powerful. At most, it was only able to measure the true age of a person below the age of 80. But even then, it was more than sufficient to measure the ages of all the young geniuses that were participating in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. When they heard Duanling Tian, not only was Nye Fen stunned, even Nye Yuan was stunned. There's such a miraculous thing in the world? Truly unbelievable. Nye Yuan's mental fortitude was stronger, and he was the first to recover from his shock as he sighed with emotion. Cloud Continent is so large and filled with all sorts of wonders. It isn't surprising that there's an existence like the age-measuring pearl. Duanling Tian shook his head and smiled, then asked. Right, Uncle Nye. Did the ambassador from the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom say when the young geniuses selected by our Crimson Sky Kingdom will go to the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom? What's the exact situation after they go? Nye Yuan's eyes flashed as he said, according to what that ambassador said, they only have to arrive at the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Imperial City within a year. As for after arriving at the Azure Forest Imperial City, the young geniuses selected by the various kingdoms only have to produce proof to become students of the Azure Forest Imperial City's Dragon and Phoenix Academy. 2 years from now, the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Imperial City will hold a genius competition. At that time, so long as the people that are able to stand out in the genius competition, they will be able to obtain the opportunity to head to the Darkstone Empire's Imperial City and compete with the young geniuses of the Darkstone Empire and the various Imperial Kingdoms. From the Imperial City to the Empire, from the Empire to the Dynasty. After that, it's the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. I can imagine that anyone that's able to walk to the end will surely soar into the sky. As he finished speaking, Nye Yuan was slightly excited. But unfortunately, this martial competition of the 10 dynasties came too quickly. If it came another 5 or 6 years and little Tian was 33 or 34 years old when the martial competition of the 10 dynasties came, then it wouldn't be difficult for him to obtain the qualifications to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties and even stand out in it. Nye Fan sighed. Even though he was confident towards Duan Lingtian, but Duan Lingtian's age was still too young after all. Perhaps, Duan Lingtian would have the chance to head to the empire or even the dynasty to compete with the young geniuses of the various kingdoms and empires. But if he wanted to seize the qualifications to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, it would probably be quite difficult. He didn't look favorably upon Duan Lingtian. Exactly. Nye Yuan nodded as well, and he agreed with Nye Fan's words. Only Duan Lingtian remained indifferent. After all, the martial competition of the 10 dynasties would only begin 5 years from now. Who could guarantee what would happen in 5 years of time? Little Tian, after you return, tell your parents. You can't miss this opportunity. A year of time can't be said to be long, yet it's not short either. Even if we use a nascent soul stage fierce beast to travel, I'm afraid it would still require half a year of time to travel from here to the Imperial City of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Nye Yuan had a serious expression as he spoke. Even though he didn't look favorably upon Duan Lingtian being able to seize the qualifications to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. However, he was extremely confident towards Duan Lingtian being able to become eminent amongst the group of young geniuses of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Even if Duan Lingtian became eminent amongst the group of young geniuses of the Darkstone Empire, he wouldn't be too surprised. So as far as he was concerned, even if Duan Lingtian was unable to seize the qualifications to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties in the end, he would still be able to obtain many rewards and benefits from the imperial family of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom and Darkstone Empire. He didn't wish for Duan Lingtian to miss it. Yes. Duan Lingtian nodded, then bid farewell to Nye Yuan and Nye Fan before leaving the Divine Might Marquis estate. The martial competition of the 10 dynasties in 5 years. Slightly interesting. Duan Lingtian stretched out his arms, and a wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. At the same time, his hand lightly shook, and a crystalline and translucent jade sword appeared in his hand. This jade sword, Duan Lingtian took a deep breath, and his gaze became faintly discernible. He still remembered that this jade sword was something he'd obtained in the misty forest near Aurora City that day. It could also be said that it was left to him by the Boundless Sect's young sect leader. At the same time, this jade sword was the culprit that caused the annihilation of the Boundless Sect. According to what the Boundless Sect's young sect leader said, this jade sword is the key to the Sword Monarch's treasure. A Sword Monarch usually refers to a sword cultivator martial monarch. A treasure vault left behind by a martial monarch would surely contain many good things. Perhaps, after Little Gold's cultivation breaks through to the Void Initiation stage, I'll be able to gather with the other possessors of the Jade Swords and head to the Sword Monarch's treasure together. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart, and the origin energy in his hand bloomed out to fuse into the Jade Sword. He still remembered that the Boundless Sect's young sect leader had reminded him that he should only open the Sword Monarch's treasure after breaking through to the Void Initiation stage. Duan Lingtian was able to understand the words of the Boundless Sect's young sect leader. After all, his cultivation was too low, and he was utterly unable to keep the Jade Sword. This Jade Sword has obviously been inscribed with a sound transmission inscription. I wonder if the other 8 Jade Swords already have owners. Duan Ling Tian still remembered what the Boundless Sect's young sect leader had said that day. There were a total of 9 jade swords. Only when all 9 jade swords were gathered together would the Sword Monarch's treasure be able to be opened. A sound transmission inscription was undoubtedly an extremely brilliant inscription, and at least the current Duan Ling Tian was unable to inscribe it. Only an inscription master whose spiritual force has attained the void transformation stage or above would be able to successfully inscribe a sound transmission inscription. The stronger the spiritual force, the greater the range of communication the sound transmission inscription inscribed would be. Duan Ling Tian thought in his heart, and the origin energy that fused into the jade sword directly activated the sound transmission inscription. A sound transmission inscription was different from ordinary inscriptions, and it wasn't a one-time use inscription. I'm able to sense the other 8 matching sound transmission inscriptions. But I wonder if the other 9 jade swords already have owners. Duan Lingtian's brows raised. Right at this moment, a sonorous laughter sounded out by Duan Lingtian's ears. Ha ha ha. The 9th jade sword has finally appeared. Brother, your luck isn't bad. I heard long ago that the jade sword fell into the hands of a sect called the Boundless Sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom all those years ago. Later on, that Boundless Sect seemed to have been annihilated by a sect called the Black Fiend Sect. Looks like you're not simple since you're able to obtain that jade sword. Brother, you're from the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, right? Duan Ling Tian knew clearly that the sonorous voice was precisely communicating with him. That was the owner of the other jade sword. What do you mean by this? Could it be that you're not from the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom? Duan Ling Tian was stunned and was slightly surprised. Exactly, I'm not from the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. I'm from the Darkstone Empire. Brother, confirm a time and place, then we'll contact the other 7 people and go open the Sword Monarch's treasure together, alright? Mother, Father. I intend to leave the Crimson Sky Kingdom and return to the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom in a few days. No matter if it was Li Ro or Duan Ruffing, both of them weren't surprised when they heard Duan Ling Tian wanted to leave. After all, Duan Ling Tian was a member of a sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom now, and he'd only returned this time for the sake of visiting his family, and he would have to return sooner or later. Tian, if you're free in the future, bring Kerr and Fei back to see Mother often. Li Ro said to Duan Ling Tian. Of course. Duan Ling Tian nodded. Besides that, remember to bid farewell to Lan and Yao before you leave. Li Ro added. Duan Ling Tian replied. In the next few days, Duan Ling Tian went to look for Xiao Lan and Princess Bai Yao to bid farewell. The 2 young women were naturally extremely reluctant when Duan Ling Tian wanted to leave, but they knew that Duan Ling Tian would leave sooner or later. They were unable to make him stay. The goddess was willing, but the king was heartless. Subsequently, Duan Ling Tian successively went to look for Xiao Yu and Xiao Sun to have a meal together before bidding farewell to the 2 of them. After that, Duan Ling Tian went to the Duan Clan and Paladin Academy to bid farewell to the Duan Clan members and the 2 deans of Paladin Academy. After that, Duan Ling Tian went to the Divine Might Marquis estate and followed the Divine Might Marquis into the Imperial Palace, and he obtained the proof of recommendation that the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Imperial Family issued to the Crimson Sky Kingdom's Imperial Family from the Crimson Sky Kingdom's Emperor. With this proof, Duan Ling Tian could rely on it to enter the Dragon and Phoenix Academy of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Imperial City and become a member of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. Dragon and Phoenix Academy? A few days ago, when he was at the Divine Might Marquis estate, Duan Ling Tian had heard the Divine Might Marquis mention this Dragon and Phoenix Academy. But when he was at the 7-Star Sword Sect, he'd never heard of this Dragon and Phoenix Academy. Your Majesty, this Dragon and Phoenix Academy is... Duan Ling Tian looked at the Emperor with a curious expression. The Emperor said, the Dragon and Phoenix Academy is a public academy that the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom specially established for the sake of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. The young geniuses recommended by the various kingdoms will enter the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. Not only that, supposedly, So long as the outstanding disciples of the various sects of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom are below the age of 35, the various sects can recommend them to enter the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. This was a little gold mouse that stood in the sky, and it glanced at the middle-aged man that had fainted with contempt before turning around and transforming into a golden light that returned to Duanlingtian's hand. 4,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes. As they looked at the 4,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes that gradually dispersed along with the little gold mouse leaving, the expressions of the Ma clan members present went grim. Subsequently, their gazes descended onto the hand of the violet-clothed young man that sat at the head. The little gold mouse comfortably closed its eyes and enjoyed the violet-clothed young man's caress, and it seemed extremely like a cute and harmless pet mouse. But now, no one dared look at this little gold mouse as if they were looking at a pet. They knew. This was a demon beast, a third-level void prying stage demon beast. Long time no see. Duanlingtian's gaze slowly descended onto the four old men behind the middle-aged man in the lead, and he grinned to reveal his snow-white teeth. But when Duanlingtian's brilliant smile entered into the eyes of the four old men, it instead caused their expressions to go grim. The gazes of the four old men descended onto Duanlingtian, and their gazes contained slight bewilderment and disbelief mixed within. Exactly, it's that little gold mouse I bought from your Ma clan auction house that day. Now that I speak of it, I have to properly thank your Ma clan, otherwise, I'm afraid I have no fate with it. Duanlingtian spoke slowly as he rubbed the little gold mouse's smooth back. From the beginning until the end, he had a calm expression that didn't contain any emotions. The bodies of the four old men shook, and the corners of their mouths held a wisp of bitterness. That little gold mouse from all those years ago has actually transformed into a third-level void-prying stage demon beast now? Is this still a gold fur mouse? You're that person from that day. The middle-aged man in the lead who wore embroidered robes was originally curious as to why their Ma clan would offend a person that had a demon beast by his side. But now, when he heard the young man before him, he seriously sized the young man up for a moment before finally recognizing the young man. Although it was the first time he'd seen this young man, he'd seen the portrait of the young man many times, and it left a deep impression on him. The incident that occurred in the Ma clan auction house a few years ago was something he'd never forget. Because of that incident, not only did their Ma clan lose a single person, they were even extorted of an entire 10 million gold. It was the first time their Ma clan had suffered such humiliation. Whereas the instigator of all this was the young man that bought the infant gold fur mouse in the Ma clan auction house. The young man before him. This third-level void-prying stage demon beast is the infant gold fur mouse that was auctioned off in our Ma clan auction house that day. The middle-aged man was the Ma clan's patriarch, and his heart was ceaselessly bleeding. If he knew earlier that this infant gold fur mouse was able to grow to such an extent in a short few years, then no matter how great the prices Ma clan had to pay, even if they had to go bankrupt, they would still digest this infant gold fur mouse internally. Even if the seller didn't allow them to digest it internally, they would still bid for it. Now, they'd instead helped someone else achieve their goal. The affairs of the world were difficult to predict. Who could have imagined that the inconspicuous infant gold fur mouse from that day would grow to such a terrifying extent in a short few years? Demon beast. Moreover, it was a third-level void-prying stage demon beast. Looks like Patriarch Ma hasn't forgotten me. Duanlingtian sat at the head and looked at the middle-aged man with a calm expression. Although it was the first time he'd seen this middle-aged man, Duanlingtian still recognized him with a single glance. Being able to make those four old fellows crowd around like this, the middle-aged man's identity was obvious. It was surely the Ma clan's patriarch without a doubt. Patriarch Ma, now that I speak of it, I still have to thank you for the 10 million gold you gave me that day. I clearly remember Patriarch Ma's generosity. Duanlingtian looked at the Ma clan's patriarch and a brilliant smile bloomed on his face. But when this smile entered into the eyes of the Ma clan higher-ups, it was no different than a devil. What exactly do you want? The Ma clan's patriarch gnashed his teeth. Although it was my Ma clan that was in the wrong that day, the instigator is already dead after all. Not only that, my Ma clan even gave you 10 million gold because of this. Moreover, you've even obtained this mutated gold fur mouse from our Ma clan's auction house. You've obtained great benefits. What else do you want? Chapter 490. Compensation for mental damage. When they heard Duan Lingtian only wanted money, all the Huang clan higher-ups, including the Huang clan's patriarch, heaved a sigh of relief. As one of the three great clans of Black Wind City that was equally famous as the Ma clan, the Huang clan naturally possessed great wealth. But in next to no time, their expressions went grim. Only because Duan Lingtian asked for a few tens of millions of gold as soon as he opened his mouth. Isn't this a bit too much? The Huang clan's patriarch glanced at Duan Lingtian with slight hesitation. Whereas the Huang clan's supreme elder that captured the little gold mouse that day and put it up for auction in the Ma clan auction house had a livid expression. After all, even the money he obtained from auctioning the little gold mouse that day was only a few million gold. This young man asked for over 10 times the amount of gold he obtained from selling the little gold mouse the moment he opened his mouth. It was simply an exorbitant demand. Too much. Duan Lingtian smiled lightly. Patriarch Huang, I believe that your Huang clan is still able to take out this bit of money. Right, that Ma clan's patriarch was much more straightforward than you. He didn't say anything before handing over 100 million gold to me. Ma clan, 100 million gold. As soon as Duan Lingtian said this, the group of Huang clan members were dumbstruck. Patriarch Huang, I'll give you the time of 3 breaths to consider. If you're unwilling, then if this little friend of mine impulsively does something, then it isn't a problem that can be solved with money. Duan Lingtian's face revealed a devilish smile. Squeak squeak, whereas the little gold mouse that stood on Duan Lingtian's shoulder swayed the grade 5 spirit sword in her hand in a timely manner, as if she was saying to the Huang clan's patriarch. If you still don't give me the money, then I'll kill all of you. The corners of the Huang clan's patriarch's mouth twitched, and he could only compromise in the end. He didn't doubt Duan Lingtian's words in the slightest. If he were to delay for 3 breaths, then this third-level void-prying stage demon beast would surely make a move against them. Clan leader Huang is indeed straightforward. After receiving the money, Duan Lingtian's face blossomed into a brilliant smile, then he glanced at the Huang clan's supreme elder. Elder, next time when you catch a ferocious beast, you better open your eyes wide and look carefully. Otherwise, I'm afraid that just you alone is enough to make the Huang clan go bankrupt. Duan Lingtian's words before he left made the Huang family's grand elder's face turn red. Only when Duan Lingtian's figure disappeared from his sight did he finally catch his breath. He was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. The congested blood fell to the ground, as if it had transformed into a resplendent red rose, blooming on the ground. When Duan Lingtian walked out of the Huang clan mansion, he was extremely happy. Now, in addition to the money given by the Huang clan, the gold in my possession has reached 200 million. Creak, creak, the little gold mouse cried out twice, then said via voice transmission, Big brother Ling Tian, don't forget my meat, don't worry, so long as we eat in the restaurant in the future, I'll order a table full of meat for you. How about it? Duan Lingtian's mood was extremely good, and he promised the little gold mouse. Hee hee. Big brother Ling Tian is the best. The little gold mouse's voice transmission was filled with excitement. Presently, it was already deep into the night, and Duan Lingtian brought the little gold mouse along to leave the Huang clan mansion, intending to return to the inn. All along the way, he couldn't see many people. Suddenly, 2 figures in the distance walked past Duan Lingtian with quick steps. Originally, it was nothing, but the light conversation of the 2 people instead attracted Duan Lingtian's attention. Fourth brother, who's that woman called Wang Qiong? Boss Wu actually went out personally to capture her. Shh. Speak softly. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. That woman has an expert with terrifying strength following by her side. If it wasn't for that guild leader Han giving so much money, Boss Wu wouldn't have taken the opportunity while that expert was in closed-door cultivation to take the risk to capture that woman. After all, once this matter was discovered by that expert, then it would be certain death. Although the voices of the two people were soft, it was still heard clearly by Duan Lingtian. Wang Qiong. Duan Lingtian frowned. He remembered that the wife of Big Brother Zhang he met in Phoenix Nest City that day was called Wang Qiong. An expert with terrifying strength by her side? She wouldn't be talking about Big Brother Zhang, right? Duan Lingtian gasped. Big Brother Zhang was the Zhang Shou-yong that Duan Lingtian met in Phoenix Nest City's Eternal Jade restaurant that day. Later on, Zhang Shou-yong and his wife sent him and Li Fei back to the Seven-Star Sword sect before leaving. Let's follow them and take a look. Although he wasn't sure, Duan Lingtian still followed them. In the end, under the lead of the two people, Duan Lingtian flipped over a luxurious estate. This estate was a private estate, and the people that lived within it were either wealthy or respectable. Guild leader Han. Duan Lingtian hid outside the hall and heard the two of them exclaim respectfully towards a middle-aged man in embroidered clothes. You are? The middle-aged man in embroidered clothes obviously didn't recognize the two of them. Guild leader Han, who we are isn't important. What's important is that the matter you entrusted to Boss Wu has already been completed. One of the two people lightly smiled as he spoke. Brother, what do you mean by this? Although the middle-aged man maintained his composure, Duan Lingtian's spiritual force was able to notice that the middle-aged man's breathing had obviously become hurried. This person is really careful. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Guild leader Han. There's a woman called Wang Qiong, and she's currently a guest in Boss Wu's estate. The other of the two said bluntly. Really? This time, the middle-aged man completely lost his composure, and his face revealed an expression of wild joy. Boss Wu really captured that bitch? Yes. The expert beside that woman just happened to be in seclusion, so Boss Wu tricked her out and captured her. Guild leader Han, Boss Wu asked us to find you, so as to avoid any trouble. We must do it cleanly before that expert finds out. One of the two said again. Oh. Good. I'll go with you now. The middle-aged man in embroidered clothes who was addressed as Guild Master Han laughed loudly and left the hall with the two of them, leaving his private mansion. Duan Lingtian continued to follow. It shouldn't be sister-in-law, right? Duan Lingtian frowned. Logically speaking, Wang Qiong shouldn't have any enmity with the people of Black Wind City. He knew Wang Qiong's character. Perhaps it was someone with the same name. Coincidentally, this Wang Qiong also had an expert by her side. However, for safety's sake, Duan Lingtian still followed them. If this Wang Qiong was really Big Brother Zhang's wife, his sister-in-law, and he missed it because of this, then it would be too late for regrets. Duan Lingtian followed the three of them and quickly arrived at the other side of Black Wind City, in an inconspicuous mansion. This mansion was extremely remote. If not for the three of them leading the way, Duan Lingtian might not have been able to find this place. Soon, Duan Lingtian discovered that the middle-aged man in embroidered clothes followed the other two into the backyard of the mansion. In the backyard, there was a separate house with a dog guarding outside. Woof woof, when the dog saw the middle-aged man in embroidered clothes, it barked as if it was in heat. Wang Kai, don't bark. We're on the same side. The two people in the lead quickly comforted the dog, causing it to temporarily calm down. Guild leader Han, Boss Wu is inside. Please. The two of them escorted the middle-aged man into the house and closed the door behind them. Duan Lingtian followed into the rear courtyard, and when he saw the mutt look over, at the instant it opened its mouth and was about to bark, his spiritual force swept out, and he used his soul skill, 1,000 illusions, to construct an illusory space. He let the dog fall asleep like a dead pig. Paw! Suddenly, a crisp slap came from the house, followed by the voice of Guild leader Han, Wang Qiong, you slut, to think that you would have such a day. I let you be proud, I let you steal my business. Today, I want to see how the person beside you will save you. Paw! 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 The crisp sound of slapping rang out continuously. Han Jianan, you're despicable. You're not my match in business, and you actually use such a despicable method to deal with me. To think that you're the president of the Valley Chamber of Commerce branch. You've really embarrassed the Valley Chamber of Commerce. A crisp and pleasant voice sounded out at the right time. It was impossible to tell if it was happy or angry. Humph. So what if I use my methods? Who asked me, Han Jianan, to have so many friends? This brother Wu Ji is a good friend of mine. So what if the person by your side is strong? Didn't you still fall into the hands of brother Wu Ji in the end? Han Jianan grunted coldly, and his tone was arrogant. Today, I'll kill you. Slut, you're not worthy to go against me. Sister-in-law. Duan Lingtian felt the female voice was slightly familiar when he heard it, and he finally recalled it after a short moment. That voice was precisely the voice of his big brother Zhang Shouyang's wife, Wang Qiong. Stay your hand. Duan Lingtian didn't dare hesitate as he shouted out explosively, and then his entire body was like a cannonball as he smashed open the door and charged into the house. This was an independent torture room. At the center of the torture room was a torture pillar with a woman tied to it. Although the woman had a sorry state, she still didn't lower her head, and the tenacity on her face caused even men to feel ashamed of their inferiority. It was precisely Wang Qiong, Zhang Shouyang's wife. Sister-in-law. Duan Lingtian's face went grim as he looked at the bruises on the woman's face, and he shouted coldly. Little gold. Instantly, little gold that was on Duan Lingtian's shoulder transformed into a golden light that shot out and bit off the rope that bound Wang Qiong, allowing Wang Qiong to regain her freedom. Brother Ling Tian. Wang Qiong originally thought that a great calamity was about to befall her, but who knew that a person would suddenly appear to save her? The person that saved her was someone she knew. Kid, who are you? Why don't you inquire about who I, Blood Leopard Wu Ji, am? In this tiny piece of land of Black Wind City, even the members of the 3 great clans don't dare rashly offend me. Since you've come today, then don't leave. A robust middle-aged man with half his arm bare and a blood leopard tattoo on it spoke to Duan Lingtian with killing intent on his face. Han Jianan, who wore embroidered clothes, was currently looking at Duan Lingtian with a mocking expression. Is that so? Duan Lingtian sneered. A half-step void stage martial artist dared to speak nonsense in front of him. Blood leopard. Today, I'll turn you into a dead leopard. Right at this moment, a hoarse voice that was filled with ruthlessness instantly swept in from outside the room and filled the entire room. Chapter 491. Practically at the instant the voice entered into the room, Duan Lingtian felt a wave of trembling come from the ground, and the frequency grew faster and faster, as if the earth was quaking. What a formidable earth concept! Right at the instant Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted and he revealed astonishment. In front of him, a tall figure appeared. This was a gray-clothed young man. The young man's expression was gloomy like water, and his eyes flickered with frightening cold lights. There seemed to be strands of earthen yellow halos flashing about on the surface of his body, and they emitted an extremely strange aura. Brother Yong. Wang Qiong revealed a wisp of an apologetic expression when she saw the gray-clothed young man appear. She was careless and caused her husband to be worried. Big brother Zhang. The person that appeared before Duan Lingtian now was precisely the Zhang Shouyang he'd gotten acquainted with in the ancient city of Everlast, the young man with extraordinary strength. He was only a little over 30 years old, yet his cultivation had already broken through to the second level of the void initiation stage. Moreover, he'd even comprehended third-level earth concept. Moreover, he possessed a grade 5 spirit weapon wine gourd. You? How did you find this place? No. It's impossible. Wu Ji seemed as if he'd seen a ghost when he saw Zhang Shouyang, and his face was ghastly pale to the extreme. In his eyes, Zhang Shouyang was an existence at the void prying stage or above, and he wasn't someone he could go against. This time, he dared capture Wang Qiong because he was sure Zhang Shouyong was in closed-door cultivation, and he was confident he could conceal Wang Qiong before alarming Zhang Shouyong. But now, all of this seemed to not be carried out according to the plan in his heart. Where exactly did I go wrong? He was unable to wrap his head around it. It's you. Han Jianan's body trembled when he saw Zhang Shouyong, and his eyes were filled with extreme terror. It was as if Zhang Shouyong was the judge that controlled life and death, and Zhang Shouyong could judge his life and death at any time and place. Han Jianan. Zhang Shouyong's face sank, and it seemed as if it was covered in a layer of ice. I warned you the last time. The matters between trading companies should be dealt with like in business. Looks like you haven't learned your lesson. If I knew you were so audacious, I shouldn't have listened to my wife and spared you. I should have killed you that day. Don't kill me, don't kill me. Han Jianan was so scared that he trembled and fell to the ground in a sorry state. Soon, the smell of urine filled the air. It was Han Jianan who was so scared that he wet his pants and peed all over the ground. This scene made Duan Lingtian speechless. This Han Jianan was the president of a branch of the Chamber of Commerce. How could he be such an idiot? Creak, creak, the little golden mouse, who was standing on Duan Lingtian's shoulder, called out twice. There was a hint of a smile in its green eyes. It was as if they were mocking Han Jianan. Killing you would only dirty my hands. Zhang Shouyong glanced at Han Jianan with disgust. Soon after, he lifted his right foot and slowly put it down. Boom! As Zhang Shouyong stomped his foot down, his origin energy surged, and an earthen yellow earth chi rose up, merging with the earth. The next moment. Kacha! 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 Ear-piercing sounds of bones cracking rang out one after another. Amidst the sounds were Han Jianan's shrill cries that were filled with extreme pain. Han Jianan's shrill cries continued for an entire 15 minutes before stopping. Whereas Han Jianan's body that trembled without end had finally stopped trembling and crashed onto the ground, smashing into a pile of mush. Duan Lingtian's pupils constricted when he saw this scene. Chapter 492. Big Brother Zhang, you're too kind. Duan Lingtian lightly smiled, then asked curiously. Big Brother Zhang, why are you and sister-in-law in Black Wind City? Besides that, why would sister-in-law incur enmity with a despicable person like Han Jianan? Let's leave first. Zhang Shouyong glanced at the 3 pools of urine on the ground and frowned, then his brows relaxed as he looked at Duan Lingtian. All right. Duan Lingtian brought along the little gold mouse and left with Zhang Shouyong and his wife, then followed Zhang Shouyong and his wife back to the courtyard they stayed in. Guild Master. At the entrance of the courtyard, 2 middle-aged men that stood guard there respectfully bowed to Wang Qiong. Wang Qiong lightly nodded. Guild Master. Duan Lingtian's brows raised, and he was slightly surprised. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian brought along the little gold mouse and followed behind Zhang Shouyong and his wife to walk into a spacious courtyard. There was a spacious room within the courtyard, and it was obviously the residence of Zhang Shouyong and his wife. All along the way, the servant girls and servants they occasionally encountered on the way all respectfully addressed Wang Qiong as Guild Master. In the spacious courtyard, Duan Lingtian, Zhang Shouyong, and Wang Qiong sat around the stone table. Big Brother Zhang, why did those people address sister-in-law as Guild Master? Could it be that sister-in-law has joined the trading company of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, and has even become the person in charge of that trading company in Black Wind City? Duan Lingtian guessed. Zhang Shouyong smiled. Brother Lingtian, you're really smart, you guessed it right. Exactly, Qiong is now the person in charge of the Floating Cloud Trading Company's branch in Black Wind City. As for that Han Jianan, he's the person in charge of another trading company in Black Wind City. When he spoke up to hear, Zhang Shouyong paused for a moment before continuing. Since Qiong became the person in charge of the Floating Cloud Trading Company in Black Wind City, Han Jianan has been suppressed by Qiong at all times. So he's always hated Cheong to the extreme. Last time, he'd already sent people to look for trouble with us, and I sent them away. But I never imagined that he'd be so audacious to dare collude with others to capture Cheong. Duan Ling Tian was suddenly enlightened. So that's how it is. Sister-in-law is able to surpass Han Jianan in every aspect. You must be very talented and resourceful in business. As he finished speaking, Duan Ling Tian looked at Wang Cheong with slight surprise. Brother Ling Tian, there's something you don't know. The clan that Cheong was born in was founded on business. Cheong followed my father-in-law everywhere since she was young and learned a lot of the ways of business. Now, it can be considered to be of use. As Zhang Shouyong spoke, he looked at Wang Cheong lovingly. I see. Duan Ling Tian nodded. Oh right, Brother Ling Tian, why are you in Black Wind City? I heard that the Seven-Star Sword sect. Zhang Shouyong looked at Duan Ling Tian and hesitated. Only now did he recall the news of the Seven-Star Sword sect being annihilated that he'd heard a few days ago. At that time, he and Wang Cheong broke out in cold sweat for the sake of Duan Ling Tian and Li Fei, who were in the Seven-Star Sword sect. Exactly, the Seven-Star Sword sect doesn't exist any longer. Duan Ling Tian nodded. Where's my little sister Fei? How is she? Wang Cheong reacted to Zhang Shouyong's reminder and asked with a concerned expression. She didn't care about the life and death of the other people in the Seven-Star Sword sect. What she cared about was the Duan Ling Tian and Li Fei that she was familiar with. Duan Ling Tian was safe and sound now, and she couldn't help but be worried about Li Fei's safety. Although he didn't know of Zhang Shouyong's origins, he was faintly able to guess that the clan Zhang Shouyong had mentioned in the past was probably a clan in the Darkhan dynasty. Perhaps, only a clan in the Darkhan dynasty was capable of fostering a genius in the martial Dao like Zhang Shouyong. Zhang Shouyong nodded, then glanced at Wang Cheong before saying, "Leave it to fate." Obviously, he was taking Wang Cheong into consideration. Duan Ling Tian perceived this as well, and he didn't say anything further before bidding his farewells. Big brother Zhang, sister-in-law, I'm leaving Black Wind City early in the morning tomorrow. Let's part ways here. As he spoke, Duan Ling Tian stood up. Zhang Shouyong and Wang Cheong nodded and sent Duan Ling Tian off with their gazes. After Duan Ling Tian left, the atmosphere between Zhang Shouyong and Wang Cheong became slightly silent. After a short moment, Wang Cheong said, "Big brother Yong, this is a good opportunity for you. I know that you've always yearned for the mysterious and unfathomable foreign lands. This time, you finally have an opportunity, you must not miss it." Zhang Shouyong sighed. What about you? I won't separate from you no matter what. Wang Cheong smiled. I'll always be by your side. Zhang Shouyong's body trembled slightly when he heard this, and then he nodded. There's no rush. There's still 4 years of time anyway. If Duan Ling Tian heard what Zhang Shouyong said now, he would surely be able to confirm Zhang Shouyong's origins with 100% certainty. 4 years. 5 years from now was the day the martial competition of the 10 dynasties began. Whereas 4 years from now was the day all the young geniuses of the Darkhan dynasty competed with the young geniuses of the various empires, imperial kingdoms, and kingdoms under the Darkhan dynasty. Obviously, Zhang Shouyong was waiting for the competition between the young geniuses of the Darkhan dynasty. At that time, they would directly compete for the qualifications to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. After Duan Ling Tian left the Floating Cloud Commerce's branch with the little gold mouse, he returned to the inn. Early in the morning of the next day, he woke up naturally from his sleep, and he brought the little gold mouse to a restaurant to have a good meal before leaving Black Wind City. After leaving Black Wind City, Duan Ling Tian headed east of Black Wind City. All along the way, he cultivated and tempered himself. If it wasn't necessary, he prohibited the little gold mouse from making a move. Under his hard work, the returns were extremely great. Time flew by. 3 months later, Duan Ling Tian had successfully broken through to the 9th level of the nascent soul stage. 8 months later, he'd successfully broken through to the half-step void stage. 11 months later, his cultivation had arrived at the peak of the half-step void stage, and he was only a step away from the void prying stage. Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, at the peak of a precipitous mountain not far from the Imperial City. A violet-colored figure sat cross-legged there. This was a violet-clothed young man with a tall figure. He had slanted brows and starry eyes, and he was extraordinarily handsome and elegant. Presently, strands of white-colored origin energy occasionally raged out from the violet-clothed young man's body, and it was accompanied by strands of light azure-colored energy that flickered with an extremely strange aura. Squeak squeak, on the shoulder of the violet-clothed young man, a fluffy little gold mouse was raising its head to look around, and it seemed to be vigilant. In its hand, it seemed to be playing with a spirit sword. Suddenly, the violet-clothed young man woke up. "It's about time." The violet-clothed young man opened his eyes that were like dazzling stars, and a heartfelt smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. Chapter 493. Squeak squeak. Duan Ling Tian had only just taken out the Monkey King wine when the little gold mouse that stood on his shoulder cried out excitedly. Obviously, it was filled with interest towards the Monkey King wine. "Big brother Ling Tian, what wine is this? Only the fragrance of the wine has caused the origin energy in my body to become restless." The little gold mouse stared eagerly at the drop of Monkey King wine in Duan Lingtian's hand as it asked via voice transmission. "You little fellow. Open your mouth." Duan Lingtian shook his head, then with a raise of his hand, he directly shot the drop of Monkey King wine into the little gold mouse's mouth. Instantly, the little gold mouse shuddered, then lay on Duan Lingtian's shoulder before closing her jade-green eyes and starting to cultivate. She was digesting the medicinal strength of the Monkey King wine. Duan Lingtian shook his head and smiled when he saw the little gold mouse immersed in cultivation, then he withdrew another drop of Monkey King wine and swallowed it. Instantly, the overbearing medicinal strength of the Monkey King wine started to wreak havoc within Duan Lingtian's body, desiring to strengthen Duan Lingtian's origin energy. But unfortunately, Duan Lingtian's origin energy had already arrived at the limit of the half-step void stage. Now, it had even been accumulated to the limit by Duan Lingtian. So, at the same time that the medicinal strength of the Monkey King wine strengthened Duan Lingtian's origin energy, it also urged the transformation of the origin energy in Duan Lingtian's body to a certain extent. 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, Lightning WIRM Form. The Lightning WIRM form was the 5th form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, and it was a cultivation method that corresponded to the void prying stage. After Duan Lingtian's cultivation broke through to the half-step void stage, the 4th form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, the Wind WIRM form, had already been cultivated to the limit. If he wanted to improve it again, then he must cultivate the 5th form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, the Lightning WIRM form. Along with Duan Lingtian circulating the mental cultivation method of the 5th form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, the origin energy in his body started to intensely tremble, and it even showed signs of collapsing. Of course, it wasn't a true breakdown. As the saying goes, a phoenix reborn from the ashes and reborn from the ashes. Duan Lingtian's elemental energy was also undergoing a similar transformation. Duan Lingtian was immersed in his cultivation. The mental cultivation method of the Lightning Flood Dragon transformation was constantly circulating. He did not know how much time had passed. It felt like only a moment had passed, but it also felt like years had passed. Finally, under the influence of the Monkey King wine, the origin energy in his body began to tremble. In the end, it underwent a qualitative change. The elemental energy that had undergone a qualitative change continuously flowed into Duan Lingtian's dantian. At the center of Duan Lingtian's dantian, the nascent soul that was condensed from origin energy suddenly expanded and became slightly illusory at the same time, void prying stage. When he looked at the nascent soul that had enlarged and become illusory, Duan Lingtian knew that he'd broken through to the void prying stage. The void prying stage was the first stage of the void stage, and it belonged to the entry stage. There were 4 great stages of the void stage, and every stage had a chasm that was difficult to surmount. The difference in strength was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. For example, a 9th-level void-prying stage martial artist was only able to exert the strength of 1 ancient horned dragon and 2,000 ancient mammoths by relying solely on origin energy. Duan Ling Tian thought in his heart, and he wanted to continue advancing towards a higher level even more. But he knew as well that he'd only just broken through to the first level of the void-prying stage now, and his foundation was unstable, let alone charging towards a higher level of cultivation. The 6-9 heavenly tribulation has arrived so quickly. In next to no time, Duan Ling Tian felt his heart palpitate for no reason or rhyme, and a thought abruptly emerged within his mind. This was the sign of the 6-9 heavenly tribulation. Every human or demon beast that had just broken through to the void-prying stage would have to experience this moment. Duan Ling Tian, who'd fused with the lifetime worth of memories of Emperor Wu of Samsara, wasn't surprised by this. Around 10 days. During this period of time, I'll properly prepare to welcome the baptism of the 6-9 heavenly tribulation. My Tempest Point still needs to rely on it. Duan Ling Tian abruptly stood up, and his fierce gaze looked towards the distance. Along with the clouds and mist dispersing, an enormous city that stood there for a long time appeared before Duan Ling Tian's eyes, and it was like a demon beast that had been in deep slumber for a long time and would awaken at any moment. That place was precisely the imperial city of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. There's still some time, and it's just nice that I can head to the Dragon and Phoenix Academy after overcoming the 6-9 heavenly tribulation. Duan Ling Tian decided in his heart. After a short moment, Duan Ling Tian's figure flashed out and abruptly flashed towards the distance. Whirlwind. At this instant, his entire body seemed to have transformed into a swift gale that swept through the clouds and mist on the peak of this mountain to the point of roiling. Whoosh! In next to no time, Duan Ling Tian pointed out with a raise of his hand. The origin energy within it condensed and flickered with strands of azure-colored energy, and its might was shocking. Whoosh! In next to no time, a milky white beam of light shot out from the tip of the finger that Duan Ling Tian pointed out, and the azure-colored energy coiled around it like a small azure snake that accompanied the white beam of light as it shot out. Bang! The white beam of light shot onto an enormous rock at the side of the mountain peak, and the small azure snake swept out, causing the enormous rock to shatter into pieces, causing shattered rocks to flutter in the air and dust to suffuse the air. Presently, I've grasped wind force, yet I know nothing about lightning force. This Tempest Point hasn't even stepped into the initial stage. But, Tempest Point is a high-grade Earth-rank martial skill after all. Even if it hasn't stepped into the initial stage, once wind force is fused into it, its might is far from something that Dragon's finishing touch can compare to. Duan Ling Tian's gaze abruptly lit up. Tempest Point was a high-grade Earth-rank martial skill, and it was a set of martial skills that came along with the fifth form of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign technique, the Lightning WYRM form. It stressed upon utilizing wind force and lightning force to complement each other to execute a formidable attack. Tempest Point caused gods and ghosts to wail. This was the Samsara Emperor Wu's annotation towards Tempest Point. Wind is adept in speed, and its attacks are swift and fierce. Although the speed of lightning is inferior to wind, it isn't much inferior. Moreover, the explosive force of lightning is far stronger than wind. Duan Ling Tian thought in his heart. A martial skill that complemented each other with wind and lightning was obvious, and its might would surely be extremely shocking. Presently, I can be considered to have preliminarily comprehended half-step advanced wind force. Whereas, I haven't even touched the surface of lightning force. I only hope that when the 6-9 heavenly tribulation arrives, I'll be able to rely on the energy of the tribulation lightning to comprehend lightning force. When he thought up to here, Duan Ling Tian glanced at the little gold mouse that was still cultivating on his shoulder. He still remembered that when the little gold mouse overcame the 6-9 heavenly tribulation that day, the 6th bolt of tribulation lightning was directly swallowed by her. Not only that, she'd even relied on the energy of the tribulation lightning to successfully comprehend lightning force. Moreover, it wasn't an ordinary lightning force, but a half-step advanced lightning force. Whereas now, the little gold mouse had relied on the natural talent of the jade-eyed heavenly mouse clan to perfectly comprehend advanced lightning force, and her comprehension of lightning force could be considered to have stepped into the perfection stage. Of course, after advanced lightning force, there was still lightning concept. That was what the little gold mouse needed to rely on the advanced lightning force to comprehend now. According to the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu and the records of the 9 Dragons War Sovereign technique, when the 6-9 heavenly tribulation arrives, I don't have to swallow the tribulation lightning like little gold. Of course, even if I wanted to swallow it, I don't have the ability. Duan Ling Tian could imagine that if he dared open his mouth and swallow the tribulation lightning like little gold, then the one that suffered misfortune would absolutely be him. The tribulation lightning wasn't something that anyone could swallow. Presently, I've comprehended half-step advanced wind force, and whirlwind can be considered to have officially stepped into the mastery stage. Once I comprehend advanced wind force, I can be considered to have cultivated whirlwind to the perfection stage. As Duan Ling Tian thought, his figure flashed out like a gale that ceaselessly swept past. For a time, dust suffused the peak of the mountain as the clouds and mist dispersed. 9 days later. It's finally here. Duan Ling Tian raised his head to look at the horizon. The clouds and mist in the horizon were ceaselessly being compressed before finally transforming into a ceaselessly revolving vortex. Chapter 494. At the center of the vortex that was squeezed from the clouds and mist that covered the sky, a ball of dark clouds was ceaselessly brewing and roiling. Hiss! 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 Violet-colored lightning ceaselessly raged, and it was like numerous little snakes that were dancing about, dazzling and resplendent. But Duan Ling Tian didn't have the mood to pay attention to all this now. Whirlwind! Duan Ling Tian's figure flashed out, and he seemed to have transformed into a gale that blew towards the horizon. Duan Ling Tian soared up into the sky, and his movements were skilled without the slightest jerkiness. If it was an ordinary martial artist that had just broken through to the void prying stage, the martial artist would at least need to familiarize himself with flying for a period of time before being able to fly. But Duan Ling Tian was different. Duan Ling Tian had fused with the lifetime worth of memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, so he was extremely familiar with the technique of flying. He easily floated in the sky, and he utterly didn't seem like a martial artist that had just broken through to the void prying stage. Now that little gold is here as well, the 6-9 heavenly tribulation will descend with 12 bolts of tribulation lightning. I wonder if I'll be able to smoothly comprehend half-step advanced lightning force by relying on 12 bolts of tribulation lightning. Duan Ling Tian looked up at the sky, and the violet-colored lightning within the dark clouds had brewed to the limit, and the first bolt of tribulation lightning would descend at any moment. Duan Ling Tian's ambition was extremely great. He wanted to comprehend half-step advanced lightning force in one go. According to the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu and the records of the 5th form of the 9 Dragon War Sovereign technique, the lightning WIRM form, so long as he utilized wind force to execute the tempest point to resist the tribulation lightning, he would be able to rely on it to comprehend lightning force. According to the deductions of Samsara Emperor Wu, he would at most comprehend elementary lightning force. Presently, the little gold mouse lay on Duan Ling Tian's shoulder as she cultivated. Although she hadn't awakened, because she hadn't left Duan Ling Tian by 100 meters, every time the 6-9 heavenly tribulation descended, it would duplicate an additional bolt of tribulation lightning that targeted the little gold mouse. Duan Ling Tian intended to withstand the 6 bolts of tribulation lightning that targeted the little gold mouse as well. It had to be said that Duan Ling Tian's idea was crazy. Finally, in the dark clouds on the horizon, the lightning accumulated to the limit and condensed into a bolt of lightning as thick as a baby's arm. Boom! The lightning struck down from the sky, carrying with it an astonishing power. It was aimed directly at Duan Ling Tian. It was the first lightning tribulation. In practically the blink of an eye, another bolt of tribulation lightning descended, and the target of this bolt of tribulation lightning was the little gold mouse that was cultivating on Duan Ling Tian's shoulder. Humph! Duan Ling Tian's gaze turned cold as he fearlessly stepped forward. Tempest Finger. Duan Ling Tian raised his hand and pointed out with his finger, his strength exploding. Whoosh! The milky white elemental energy beam condensed together and shot out with a whistling sound. His target was the lightning tribulation that was descending first. The surroundings of the elemental energy beam were coiled with strands of azure-colored energy, and they were like numerous little azure-colored snakes that were swimming about. It was precisely the half-step advanced wind force that Duan Ling Tian had comprehended. After he pointed out with his finger, Duan Ling Tian was dissatisfied with being negligent. Tempest Finger. He pointed out with his finger once more, and the same elemental energy beam pierced towards the other bolt of tribulation lightning. Bang! Bang! Two enormous bangs sounded out in practically an instant, and it was the incomplete Tempest Finger executed by Duan Ling Tian that easily destroyed the two bolts of tribulation lightning. Duan Ling Tian heaved a sigh of relief, and he looked at the horizon with a solemn expression. Although he'd easily stopped the first bolt of tribulation lightning, he knew that the truly formidable lightning tribulation was still behind. He'd witnessed the little gold mouse overcoming the tribulation with his own two eyes that day. Bang! In next to no time, the second bolt of tribulation lightning condensed into form and descended with a bang. Bang! Another bolt of tribulation lightning with a similar might followed closely behind. Another two bolts of tribulation lightning. One headed straight for Duan Ling Tian, and the other headed straight for the little gold mouse. But the little gold mouse was still cultivating now, and only Duan Ling Tian could rely on himself to forcefully resist these two bolts of tribulation lightning. Swish! Swish! He pointed out with two fingers once more, and the milky white beam of light that was coiled by wind force shot out through the Tempest Finger executed by Duan Ling Tian to intercept the two bolts of tribulation lightning. Bang! Bang! The two bolts of tribulation lightning were destroyed once more. Meanwhile, Duan Ling Tian felt his vital energy and blood roil. The strength of two bolts of tribulation lightning is extremely strong as expected. Duan Ling Tian took a deep breath and continued to look up at the sky. He was waiting for the third bolt of tribulation lightning. Earlier, Duan Ling Tian had a certain amount of gains from successively withstanding 4 bolts of tribulation lightning. Every time he executed the Tempest Finger and pointed towards the bolt of tribulation lightning, he could clearly feel the changes in the lightning within the tribulation lightning, violent, raging, and possessed shocking might. Bang! The third bolt of tribulation lightning arrived as scheduled. Bang! Behind it, another bolt of tribulation lightning tailed over. Duan Ling Tian's gaze went slightly cold. Tempest Finger. With a raise of his hand, Duan Ling Tian pointed out with his finger, and the beam of origin energy that was coiled by wind force instantly swept towards the bolt of tribulation lightning in the lead. Bang! The bolt of tribulation lightning and the beam of origin energy exploded at almost the exact same time, then transformed into nothingness. Meanwhile, Duan Ling Tian's internal organs trembled, and he felt his vital energy and blood roil. The might of the third bolt of tribulation lightning is actually so strong. When he saw another bolt of tribulation lightning flashing over from behind, and it was temporarily impossible for him to execute a second Tempest Finger, Duan Ling Tian chose to dodge. Whirlwind. Duan Ling Tian's figure flashed as if he transformed into a gale, and it was even more like he was racing with that bolt of tribulation lightning. But, even though his speed was swift, the speed of the tribulation lightning was swifter. However, Duan Ling Tian didn't intend to pull apart the distance between him and the tribulation lightning, because he knew that it wasn't realistic. The reason he chose to dodge was only for the sake of catching his breath. After all, after he executed Tempest Finger to forcefully resist the third bolt of tribulation lightning, the origin energy within his body had collapsed, and it was difficult for him to gather it in a short period of time, making it difficult for him to condense it to execute Tempest Finger once more. Whereas now, he'd caught his breath. Tempest Finger. Duan Ling Tian abruptly turned around and pointed out with his finger, causing piercing howls to explode out as the airflow in the air moved rhythmically to split into two. Swish! A beam of origin energy that contained half-step advanced wind force shot out and fiercely collided with the bolt of tribulation lightning. Bang! Another enormous bang sounded out. At the same time that Duan Lingtian felt his vital energy and blood roil once more, this bolt of tribulation lightning that pursued the little gold mouse was finally resisted by him. Right at this moment. Bang! Bang! Two thunderclaps sounded out one after the other as they descended from the horizon. The fourth bolt of tribulation lightning descended with a bang. This time, Duan Lingtian repeated the same trick and successfully resisted two bolts of tribulation lightning. But even then, he still suffered a light injury. Fortunately, his injuries weren't heavy, and after he consumed a healing medicinal pill, he recovered in the blink of an eye. Lightning, Duan Lingtian looked up at the sky, and before the appearance of the fifth bolt of tribulation lightning, he'd comprehended something. Earlier, he'd successively resisted numerous bolts of tribulation lightning, and especially when he used Tempest Finger to collide head-on with the tribulation lightning. To a certain extent, it allowed Duan Lingtian to have a clear understanding of the characteristics of lightning. Hiss! With a command in Duan Lingtian's heart, besides the fierce wind force, there was actually an additional strand of unstable violet-colored energy on the origin energy that jumped about on the tip of his finger. Lightning Force Seed? Duan Lingtian's gaze abruptly lit up, as he knew that he'd already taken the first step. The Lightning Force Seed was the foundation of Lightning Force. Comprehending the Lightning Force Seed also meant that he would soon be able to truly comprehend Lightning Force. The fifth bolt of tribulation lightning. Come! Duan Lingtian looked up at the sky with an expression of anticipation. He believed that now that he'd comprehended the Lightning Force Seed, so long as he continued to come into close contact with the tribulation lightning, he would surely be able to comprehend true lightning force. This was something he was extremely confident of. Bang! Bang! Accompanied by two terrifying sounds of thunder descending, the thick lightning bolts crashed down like two meteors falling from the horizon. Tempest Finger. Duan Lingtian soared into the sky to intercept the first bolt of tribulation lightning, and he pointed out with his finger. Swish! This time, besides the fierce azure-colored energy coiled around the origin energy beam that shot out from the tip of Duan Lingtian's finger, there was an additional strand of light violet-colored energy, and it was precisely the Lightning Force Seed. Duan Lingtian had a feeling. The Tempest Finger he executed now couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as before. Right now, the Wind and Lightning Finger had both wind force and lightning force. Even though the latter was only a Lightning Force Seed, it was sufficient to allow the Tempest Finger to advance to a new level. So long as the Lightning Force Seed is able to transform into true lightning force, then my Tempest Finger will officially step into the initial stage. At the same time that Duan Lingtian pointed out with his finger, he thought in his heart. In the blink of an eye, the origin energy beam shot out from Duan Lingtian's finger. The Tempest Finger that had just taken form, collided with the fifth bolt of tribulation lightning and emitted an enormous bang. The airflow in the air flashed as the sound of air exploding rose and fell continuously. Pooh! At the instant the Tempest Finger collided with the tribulation lightning, the violent energy contained within the tribulation lightning shook Duan Lingtian's internal organs to the point of trembling, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Duan Lingtian's injuries weren't light. Bang! Right when Duan Lingtian's body was on the verge of collapse, another bolt of tribulation lightning that targeted the little gold mouse descended. This bolt of tribulation lightning was copied from the foundation of the fifth bolt of tribulation lightning of the 6-9 heavenly tribulation, and its might was extremely strong. For a time, not to mention condensing his origin energy once more, Duan Lingtian, who was heavily injured at this moment, was even slightly unable to catch his breath. Whirlwind. Duan Lingtian gritted his teeth and wanted to execute his movement technique to dodge. But, even with the assistance of half-step advanced wind force, the speed of his scattered origin energy was far inferior to this bolt of tribulation lightning. Little gold. Duan Lingtian's face went grim, and he couldn't be bothered to care that the little gold mouse was still cultivating as he directly sent a voice transmission into the little gold mouse's ears. At practically the instant he sent the voice transmission, the bolt of tribulation lightning had already descended towards him. Although the target of the tribulation lightning was only the little gold mouse was still on his shoulder. But the little gold mouse was lying on his shoulder, so for a time, he'd become the target of the tribulation lightning as well. The tribulation lightning was high up in the sky as its terrifying aura enveloped down, and it practically sealed Duan Lingtian within it, causing Duan Lingtian to feel as if he was within a thunderstorm. What entered his eyes was a dazzling scene, and the aura of lightning carried along the might of nature as it swept over. At this instant, Duan Lingtian abruptly closed his eyes and seemed to have comprehended something. This is lightning. At this moment, Duan Lingtian had even forgotten that he was in a dangerous situation, and he still silently savored the aura of lightning as he comprehended the characteristics of lightning and everything about lightning. The lightning force seed that Duan Lingtian had comprehended was silently strengthening. The bolt of tribulation lightning was about to blast onto Duan Lingtian. Squeak squeak. Chapter 495. Amidst her sharp cry, the little gold mouse transformed into an exceedingly swift golden light that left Duan Lingtian's shoulder and shot towards the horizon. Whereas the bolt of tribulation lightning that descended with a bang turned around above Duan Lingtian's head and chased after the little gold mouse. The little gold mouse stopped moving and stood in midair. As she looked at the bolt of tribulation lightning that flashed over, the little gold mouse's jade-green eyes contained slight disdain mixed within. Bang! The bolt of tribulation lightning charged menacingly directly towards the little gold mouse. The bolt of tribulation lightning was about to strike the little gold mouse. Squeak! The little gold mouse's body didn't even enlarge as she opened her mouth and let out a sharp cry. Instantly, the air trembled, and the surrounding airflow started to flash towards the little gold mouse's mouth like a bolt of lightning. Whereas the bolt of tribulation lightning was swallowed into the little gold mouse's stomach without the slightest delay. The thunder was loud, but the rain was small. In the blink of an eye, the bolt of tribulation lightning that approached menacingly had become food in the little gold mouse's stomach. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse rubbed her bulging stomach as she looked complacently at Duan Lingtian, wanting to take credit. In next to no time, she noticed that Duan Lingtian stood there like a block of wood without the slightest reaction, and she instantly drooped her little head in slight dejection. Bang! Bang! The dark clouds in the horizon roiled as the sixth bolt of tribulation lightning of the 6-9 heavenly tribulation, which was also the last bolt of tribulation lightning, had finally condensed into form and descended with a bang. Accompanying its descent was another bolt of tribulation lightning that possessed might not inferior to it. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse's eyes glowed as she flashed out to approach Duan Lingtian and wait for the descent of the two bolts of tribulation lightning. The first bolt of tribulation lightning descended with a bang like a falling meteor, and its target was Duan Lingtian. Squeak! But, even though the bolt of tribulation lightning came menacingly, it was swallowed into the little gold mouse's stomach without the slightest delay when she opened her mouth. Subsequently, the little gold mouse's gaze descended onto the bolt of tribulation lightning at the back. Right when the little gold mouse opened her mouth once more with the intention of swallowing the last bolt of tribulation lightning. Little gold, leave this bolt of tribulation lightning to me. Duan Lingtian woke up, and as soon as he opened his eyes, his body moved. As swift as the wind, as shocking as thunder. In the blink of an eye, Duan Lingtian soared into the sky to greet the final bolt of lightning that descended with a bang. Now, it's time to test the might of the lightning force I just comprehended. The corners of Duan Lingtian's mouth curled up into a smile. His gaze suddenly focused as he raised his hand, his sleeve fluttering as he pointed out with his finger. His yuan power condensed with an awe-inspiring might that seemed capable of piercing through everything. Tempest Finger. A light beam shot out from Duan Lingtian's fingertip. It was intertwined with strands of green and purple gang qi. The purple gang qi was slightly weaker, but not by much. The beam of origin energy was accompanied by wind force and lightning force as it swept out, and it formed the true tempest force. Whoosh! The tempest point shot out with an ear-piercing screech. The airflow in the air moved as it fiercely hit the last tribulation lightning. Bang! An enormous bang sounded out as the last tribulation lightning was directly shattered by Duan Lingtian's finger, and it transformed into nothingness. Whereas the advancement of one's cultivation was extremely difficult, and it was different from ordinary high-grade earth rank martial skills. For ordinary high-grade earth rank martial skills, so long as one's force was improved, then one's cultivation could be improved along with it. Just like the high-grade earth rank movement technique Duan Ling Tian cultivated, whirlwind. So long as one's wind force was improved to a certain extent, then whirlwind would be able to improve along with it. Presently, Duan Ling Tian had comprehended half-step advanced wind force, and whirlwind had improved to the mastery stage along with it. Whereas Tempest Point instead required wind force and lightning force to improve at the same time before it could complete the advancement of its cultivation. Just like before. Even though Duan Ling Tian had comprehended half-step advanced wind force, because he hadn't comprehended lightning force, even if he executed the Tempest Point, it would still be an incomplete Tempest Point, and it was even to the extent that it hadn't even stepped into the initial stage. The Tempest Point's cultivation required both wind force and lightning force to satisfy the conditions at the same time before it could be improved. Just like now. Duan Lingtian's wind force and lightning force were both half-step advanced force, and the Tempest Point he executed when they complemented each other could be considered to have stepped into the mastery stage. Whereas if he wanted to cultivate Tempest Point to the perfection stage, then he must cultivate both wind force and lightning force to the advanced stage at the same time. My Tempest Point is sufficient to crush any high-grade earth rank martial skill of the same cultivation. This was something Duan Ling Tian was extremely confident in. What a joke! Tempest Point was a high-grade earth rank martial skill that came along with the 9-Dragon War Sovereign technique, and its might wasn't inferior to any high-grade earth rank martial skill in the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu. After all, this was a martial skill that utilized two types of force complementing each other. A high-grade earth rank martial skill like this was extremely rare. Even in the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, there weren't many martial skills like this. Finally, Duan Ling Tian returned to his senses, and he looked at the little gold mouse that descended on his shoulder as he said with a smile, "Little gold, looks like you're not far away from breaking through to the next level. I thought you would be able to rely on the medicinal strength of the Monkey King wine to break through this time. Big brother Ling Tian, give me some more." The little gold mouse looked eagerly at Duan Ling Tian, and her jade green eyes were filled with yearning. "We'll talk about it in the future." Duan Ling Tian lightly shook his head, then his brows raised as his gaze descended onto the vast city behind the clouds and mist in the distance. "We ought to enter the city. Once the Dragon and Phoenix Academy is settled down, I'll give you 2 more drops of Monkey King wine, and they're the last 2 drops. Big brother Ling Tian, you're too stingy." The little gold mouse once again sent a voice transmission, and she was slightly unhappy. "It's not that I'm stingy, but this Monkey King wine is the same as spirit fruits. After consuming it once and consuming it later on, its effects will decrease infinitely. No matter how much I give you, it's still a waste. Moreover, I don't have much Monkey King wine in my possession." Duan Ling Tian shook his head and revealed a bitter smile. "Does this little gold really think that the Monkey King wine in my possession is an ordinary wine that I can have as much as I want?" The little gold mouse went silent for a moment when she heard Duan Ling Tian, then she started jumping for joy. Like a child that hadn't grown up. "Let's go, enter the city." Duan Ling Tian brought along the little gold mouse as his figure flashed out towards the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Duan Ling Tian only descended from the sky when they arrived outside the entrance of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Meanwhile, many void-prying stage martial artists that had similarly descended noticed Duan Ling Tian. At the beginning, they didn't pay much attention to him, but when they saw Duan Ling Tian's appearance clearly, they were instead dumbstruck. This young man looks to be less than 25 years old, yet he's actually already a void-prying stage martial artist. A void-prying stage martial artist couldn't help but gulp down a mouthful of saliva as he spoke in astonishment. Impossible, right? The head of our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's 5 great young masters, Crazy Young Master, had only just stepped into the void-prying stage at the age of 29. His companion shook his head and didn't dare believe it. Could it be that he took good care of himself? The former was surprised and bewildered. It's possible. The latter nodded in all seriousness. Waves of similar discussions sounded out from the mouths of the void-prying stage martial artists that saw Duan Lingtian descend from the sky. Duan Lingtian naturally heard it as well, and he was speechless. Took good care of himself. To think that they were able to think of it. However, they did remind me. In the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, there are indeed many methods of taking good care of oneself, but most of them are assisted by spirit medicines. If it's a woman or a martial artist that has stepped into the void-prying stage or above, it wouldn't be so troublesome. Duan Lingtian flashed through the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, and thought in his heart. That deadbeat father of mine is 50 years old, yet looks to be around 30 years old. There's only two possibilities. Firstly, he consumed a spirit medicine that slows down the aging of one's appearance. Secondly, he once broke through to the void-prying stage. Chapter 496. As for women. Perhaps it was because the heavens had bestowed upon men various advantages over women, so they compensated women in other aspects. So long as women took care of themselves, they were able to slow down aging to a certain extent, just like Duan Lingtian's mother, Li Ro. Even though she was a little over 40 years old, she looked as if she wasn't even 30 years old yet. This was the innate advantage of women. So long as one's cultivation steps into the void-prying stage, even though it's not to the extent of rejuvenating oneself, but so long as one intends, one can use origin energy to control aging to a certain extent. It's even to the extent that martial artists at the void-prying stage and above still have the appearance of a middle-aged man when they die of old age 100 years later. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart. Presently, the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu ceaselessly flashed within his mind. So long as one has the patience to frequently use origin energy to activate one's flesh and skin, the higher one's cultivation is, the better one can slow down aging. During the first lifetime of Samsara Emperor Wu, his cultivation stepped into the Emperor Wu stage, and he was already 120 years old. But at that time, merely based on his outer appearance, he was only a middle-aged man around the age of 50. Through the memories of Samsara Emperor Wu, Duan Lingtian found out about the appearance of Samsara Emperor Wu before he underwent samsara. As for the second lifetime of Samsara Emperor Wu, before he underwent samsara, he was 113 years old, and his outer appearance was only a young man around the age of 30. Duan Lingtian's mood surged. 113 years old, yet looked like a young man around the age of 30. What sort of concept was this? Of course, Duan Lingtian knew the reason Samsara Emperor Wu was able to maintain such a young appearance during his second lifetime. During his second lifetime of Samsara Emperor Wu, his cultivation had already broken through to the void-prying stage at the age of 25. Since that time, Samsara Emperor Wu intentionally used origin energy to slow down his aging. Later on, Samsara Emperor Wu found the treasures he left behind during his first lifetime, and he stepped into the void initiation stage, void interpretation stage, and even the void transformation stage at an extremely fast speed. Later on, the rebirth martial emperor even became a martial monarch when he was 50 years old by relying on the experience of his first lifetime. At the age of 60, he successfully became Emperor Wu. The achievements of the reincarnation Emperor Wu in his second lifetime, especially the time he spent to become Emperor Wu, could be said to be unprecedented on Cloud Continent. At the very least, in the history of Cloud Continent, there had never been such a young Emperor Wu. Once one becomes a martial emperor, although one can't rejuvenate their youth, they can retain their youth forever. If the Emperor Wu of the Samsara era had become a martial emperor 10 years earlier, he might have been able to maintain his appearance when he was 26 or 27 years old. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart as he thought in his heart. Martial artists at the void-prying stage and above mostly can't be judged by appearance and age. Even if a martial artist at the void-prying stage and above didn't intentionally use origin energy to slow down their aging, their formidable origin energy is still able to unintentionally slow down their aging, and their aging speed is far slower than ordinary martial artists. Duan Lingtian shook his head and withdrew his thoughts. Subsequently, Duan Ling Tian disregarded the surprised gazes from the surroundings as he walked with large strides towards the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's imperial city. The Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's imperial city was boundlessly vast and imposing, and it was like an enormous beast that lay there. The wide-open door was like the bloody maw of this enormous beast, and it ceaselessly swallowed people into its stomach. On both sides of the door was a row of armored soldiers guarding there. They stood ramrod straight, and their gazes didn't contain the slightest expression as they looked coldly and indifferently ahead. Duan Ling Tian slowly walked into the city, and the little gold mouse on his shoulder looked around with interest. The cute little gold mouse drew the gazes of many people. These people were mostly women and children. "Mom, what a cute little gold mouse." An immature voice sounded out from the side, and it was naive and unaffected. Duan Ling Tian slightly turned his head and saw an ordinary woman carrying a little boy as she walked nearby. "Young master, the child speaks without thinking, I hope you can forgive him." The woman hurriedly covered the little boy's mouth, and she had a terrified expression as she bowed and apologized to Duan Ling Tian. "It's fine." Duan Ling Tian shook his head and smiled. He naturally guessed why the woman had such a reaction. The violet clothes he wore weren't ordinary cloth, but were instead made from special silk that was worth 1,000 gold coins. Obviously, the woman discerned that he was extraordinary from the clothes he wore. Duan Ling Tian didn't know. This woman didn't merely discern that he was extraordinary from the clothes he wore. The bearing he unintentionally emitted coupled with his clothes gave the woman the feeling that he was a respected existence that couldn't be offended. This world is like this, there's a clear distinction between ranks. Before these ordinary people, I'm different and high above. However, in front of the current me, those experts at the ascension stage and above are similarly high and mighty. The woman's reaction caused Duan Ling Tian to sigh with emotion. He knew that only by standing at the peak and becoming a person above others would he be able to make this feeling vanish. Otherwise, there would always be someone that stood higher than him and was able to look down upon him. Duan Ling Tian's heart of an expert had unknowingly become more tenacious. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse suddenly cried out, and at the same time, a voice transmission entered into Duan Ling Tian's ears. "Big brother Ling Tian, I'm hungry. I want to eat meat, I want to eat meat." Duan Ling Tian lowered his head and rolled his eyes at the little gold mouse. "You little fellow, you're really a foodie." Even though he said this, Duan Ling Tian still found a restaurant. The restaurant was incomparably luxurious, and it was far from something a small restaurant could compare to. It was only close to meal time now, and the customers within the restaurant had just increased. Duan Ling Tian occupied 2 tables by himself. "Customer, do you need anything?" The restaurant's attendant came over to greet Duan Ling Tian and warmly entertained him.
"Fill that table with various fragrant stir-fried meat. As for my table, just casually serve some of your restaurant's signature dishes and a jug of wine." Duan Ling Tian chose a seat by the window and sat down. Then he pointed at the empty table beside him as he spoke to the attendant. "Yes, customer." The attendant replied and left with a face full of smiles. He loved to entertain this sort of frank customer the most. As for Duan Ling Tian asking for 2 tables and only ordering stir-fried meat for the empty table, he didn't feel it was strange. He only thought that this customer still had companions that hadn't come, and this customer's companions preferred to eat meat. When the dishes were served and he saw the little gold mouse on Duan Ling Tian's shoulder fly out to sweep away the stir-fried meat on the single table, the attendant was completely dumbstruck. As an attendant in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's imperial city, he felt that he'd seen much of the world. But it was truly the first time he'd seen someone so extravagantly ordering a table of stir-fried meat for a pet mouse to eat. The world of the rich is really not something we can understand. Even if it's the young masters and young misses of the great clans in the imperial city, I've seen many of them, but I've never seen them so extravagant. The attendant couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Meanwhile, the table the little gold mouse sat at attracted attention as expected. Extravagant. Too extravagant. This is the Drifting Fragrance Restaurant. That table of stir-fried meat would at least cost 100 silver. 100 silver for a pet mouse's meal? Squandering, too squandering. I wonder which young master is from, to actually squander like this. Even if he has money, he shouldn't spend it like this. For a time, the crowd of customers in the restaurant whispered in discussion. Huh. Little Gold, looks like they all think you're only a pet mouse. Duan Ling Tian remained indifferent when he heard the whispers of these people, and he couldn't help but send a voice transmission to tease the little gold mouse. Squeak squeak, the little gold mouse cried out with dissatisfaction, yet couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the people around her, and she buried her head in eating. Duan Ling Tian shook his head and smiled. Yet he didn't know what expression these people that were sighing about his extravagance and squandering would have if they knew that it was this little gold mouse that had helped him earn over 100 million gold. Almost 1 year ago in Black Wind City, he'd precisely relied on the deterrence of the little gold mouse to forcefully extort a large sum of money from the Ma clan and Huang clan. That huge sum of money added up to more than 100 million taels of gold. 100 silver for a table of dishes? Duan Ling Tian remained indifferent. 100 taels of silver was equivalent to 1 tael of gold. Compared to the over 100 million gold that the little gold mouse had earned for him, it was simply a drop in the ocean and wasn't worth mentioning. Along with the passage of time, the restaurant was bustling with people, and there were no empty seats. Many people entered the restaurant, and because they didn't have a seat, they could only sigh and leave. Most of these people that left glanced at the little gold mouse that occupied a table by itself with envy and jealousy, and they all felt that their entire lives were inferior to a pet mouse. Duan Ling Tian was originally still drinking and eating when a few figures approached, causing him to frown. Duan Ling Tian lazily raised his head, and only now did he see a young man in embroidered clothes walking over with 2 middle-aged men. The young man in embroidered clothes' gaze descended onto the little gold mouse, and he was slightly surprised.
Chapter 498. Duan Ling Tian stood on the empty ground and was able to see many young geniuses walking over successively from all directions, and the space between their brows had slight excitement and arrogance mixed within. So many people. All of them are people recommended by the various powers of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Duan Ling Tian was shocked when he saw so many people. With a quick thought, he came to an understanding. These few days are the last few days for the young geniuses of the various powers to register at the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. Many people ought to have only come to register in these few days. Duan Ling Tian thought in his heart, and his gaze descended onto the empty ground before him. There was an arched door in front of them. At the side of the door stood a tall stone tablet, and on the stone tablet were 3 large words that were carved in a flamboyant style: Dragon and Phoenix Academy. These 4 words were carved in one go, and are filled with a peerlessly fierce aura. I presume it was personally carved by an expert. Duan Ling Tian thought in his heart. Presently, there were 3 old men sitting behind a stone table before the arched door, and the stone table was neatly placed with brushes and ink. The young geniuses that gushed over from all directions successively arrived before the table of the 3 old men before withdrawing a certificate and passing it to the 3 old men for inspection. After they inspected it, the 3 old men would complete their registration and give them a command token. The people that obtained the command token excitedly passed through the arched door and walked into the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. There's really many people. Duan Ling Tian looked at the 3 long lines before him and couldn't help but shake his head. Then his body slightly leaned forward, intending to line up. Right at this moment. Roar! An enormous roar sounded out by Duan Ling Tian's ears, and it was like a thunderclap. Not only did it alarm Duan Ling Tian, even the young geniuses that were lining up couldn't help but turn around to look over. Duan Ling Tian turned around. With a single glance, he saw an enormous leopard walking over here, and everywhere it passed, the passers-by would move aside in succession. This leopard's entire body was covered in snow-white fur that seemed like white flames that were burning. Every time it opened its bloody mouth and emitted a low roar, it caused coldness to arise from the bottom of one's heart. Snow leopard. Duan Ling Tian was a little surprised. He didn't think that there would be someone using this kind of beast as a means of transportation in the imperial city. Snow leopard, a 7th-level nascent soul stage fierce beast. 2 words immediately popped up in his mind. Acting tough. It's the Yin clan's Yin Zhe. Yin Zhe, the Yin clan's second young master. In terms of natural talent, he's only inferior to the 5 great young masters of our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. I've long since heard of him. Since he's able to tame a snow leopard, the strength of this Yin clan's second young master is surely at the 7th level of the nascent soul stage or above. This Yin clan's second young master, Yin Zhe, is 29 years old this year, and his cultivation is supposedly already at the 9th level of the nascent soul stage. Many people were whispering, and Duan Ling Tian knew the identity of the person who had come. Yin family? Duan Ling Tian raised his eyebrows. He had never heard of this family before. But presumably, it should be a clan from the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's imperial city, and it wasn't an ordinary small clan. Duan Ling Tian was able to discern this from the fearful gazes of many young geniuses. Oh! Yin Zhe, you've really come early. Right at this moment, a hearty laughter sounded out. Accompanying this laughter was a shocking roar of a beast. An enormous wolf that was completely covered in black striped fur appeared. After the enormous wolf appeared, its scarlet red eyes stared fixedly at the snow leopard, as if it would pounce over and fight it at any moment. Black striped wolf. Many people exclaimed in surprise. Black striped wolf, a 7th-level nascent soul stage fierce beast, and it was even more ferocious than the snow leopard. Another powerful dire beast. Many young geniuses looked enviously at the person on the back of the black-striped wolf. Duan Ling Tian looked over as well. This was a young man around the age of 30 that wore black clothes. His appearance was ordinary, but an insufferably arrogant expression was emitted from between his brows. Half-step void stage? Duan Ling Tian's spiritual force stretched out and detected this person's cultivation at the first possible moment. It's the Sima clan's Sima Yang. This Sima Yang is a genius martial artist of our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom as well. In terms of natural talent, he's comparable to Yin Zhe and is only inferior to the 5 great young masters. Someone recognized the black-clothed young man and exclaimed in a low voice. Humph! Sima Yang, what a coincidence, I can even encounter you while registering. Yin Zhe grunted coldly. Obviously, he didn't get along well with Sima Yang. As soon as Yin Zhe finished speaking, he didn't pay any further attention to Sima Yang and commanded the snow leopard to continue walking towards the Dragon and Phoenix Academy's entrance. Everywhere it passed, all the young geniuses moved aside. In next to no time, the snow leopard that Yin Zhe sat on had arrived before Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian just happened to be standing at the empty space before the entrance. At this moment, Yin Zhe had 2 choices. The first was to go around Duan Ling Tian's left side. The second was to go around Duan Ling Tian's right side. After all, this empty space was extremely spacious. But Yin Zhe didn't choose, and instead glanced coldly at Duan Ling Tian as he shouted coldly. Where did this kid that's still wet behind his ears come from? F***K off. Duan Ling Tian glanced indifferently at Yin Zhe, then paid no further attention to him, as if he utterly didn't hear what Yin Zhe said. Yin Zhe's face sank. Roar! The snow leopard that Yin Zhe sat on seemed to have noticed its master's rage, and it roared in a low voice at Duan Ling Tian who was blocking the way. Duan Ling Tian frowned, and finally spoke lazily. The road is so wide, don't you know how to go around it? Go around it? Yin Zhe's already gloomy face couldn't help but reveal a ridiculing smile when he heard Duan Ling Tian. Kid that's still wet behind his ears, Yin Zhe, never go around it. If you know what's good for you, then quickly F***K off. Otherwise, I'll make the snow leopard directly press down on you. His words were filled with a threatening intent. Duan Lingtian's calm expression finally sank. Make the snow leopard press down on me. Does this Inja really think he's a judge that decides life and death? Then I really want to know how you're going to make this snow leopard press down on me. The gloominess on Duan Lingtian's face instantly vanished without a trace, and replacing it was a brilliant smile. Duan Lingtian's words caused Inja to be unable to refrain from frowning. As the Yin clan's second young master and possessing extraordinary natural talent in the martial Dao, it was naturally impossible for him to be an idiot. Presently, there were only two possibilities why the violet-clothed young man before him still dared act like this after knowing his identity. Firstly, this was a rash youth that utterly didn't know what status their Yin clan possessed in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's imperial city. Secondly, this was an existence with a shocking background that wasn't afraid of their Yin clan. For a time, he instead hesitated. Roar! Right when Inja was hesitating, another beast roar sounded out. A young man in embroidered clothes sat on an enormous tiger that was completely covered in sky-blue fur as he walked over, and everywhere he passed, the passers-by moved aside. Ji Feng. The brows of Sima Yang, who sat on the black-striped wolf, raised as he greeted the young man in embroidered clothes. It's him. Duan Lingtian recognized the person that had arrived. It was precisely the young man in embroidered clothes that he'd met once in the restaurant earlier. At that time, he'd thrown an ignorant follower of the young man in embroidered clothes into the restaurant. He'd originally thought that the young man would stand up for his subordinate. Unexpectedly, the young man had actually left directly. At that time, he knew that the young man was an extremely scheming person, and it was absolutely impossible for the young man to make things difficult for the young man before he found out about the young man's background. A person like this was extremely terrifying. It's the Ji clan's Ji Feng. In terms of natural talent, this Ji Feng is a figure on par with Inja and Sima Yang. He's only 29 years old, yet his cultivation has already stepped into the 9th level of the nascent soul stage. Many young geniuses recognize Ji Feng. Inja, you should obediently take a detour. Huh. Ji Feng imperceptibly nodded with a smile to Duan Lingtian, then he looked at Inja, who rode a snow leopard and stood nearby before Duan Lingtian, and he started laughing loudly. There was no lack of ridicule within his laughter. Obviously, Ji Feng and Inja didn't get along well. Sima Yang looked at Inja as well, and a trace of ridicule appeared on the corners of his mouth. Inja, obediently take a detour. Do you really think that the road before the Dragon and Phoenix Academies entrance belongs to your Yin clan? Humph. Inja was originally still guessing Duan Lingtian's identity and background, but now that he was ridiculed by his two old rivals, his face instantly flushed red and he was enraged to the limit, and he'd completely lost all reason. Kid, I'll give you one last chance. Fuck off. Otherwise, I'll take your life. Inja's icy cold eyes stared at Duan Lingtian as he shouted with a grim voice. At this moment, he'd vented all his rage onto Duan Lingtian. Take my life? Duan Lingtian shook his head and said indifferently, this is a large and empty space, and all the spectating young geniuses can testify that it was I who stood here first. As the saying goes, first come first serve. I came first, and you came later. Logically speaking, it ought to be you that takes a detour. Now, you're actually taking my life for such a small matter? As Duan Lingtian finished speaking, even though his tone was still calm, his eyes had already flickered with an imperceptible and frightening cold light. Duan Lingtian was enraged. Has this young man gone mad? Does he know who he's talking to? He's a young genius that was recommended to the Dragon and Phoenix Academy as well. He wondered which faction had recommended him. Was there no one else in that faction? A young man like this is able to be recommended to the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. He's going to be in trouble. Of course. Inja's temper is famous for being bad. Today, this young man being so unappreciative will surely completely infuriate Inja. The crowd of spectating young geniuses whispered in discussion. Inja, I think this brother is right. Everything has to be done first come first serve. Right at this moment, Ji Feng rode his enormous tiger over slowly, and when he arrived before Duan Lingtian, he went around him before looking at Yingzhe, and the ridicule on his face didn't reduce in the slightest. Humph. Ji Feng, you're really getting worse and worse. Yingzhe glanced coldly at Ji Feng, and then his gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian as he laughed with ridicule. You actually took a detour for a little kid like this? Today, I'll let you see that I, Yingzhe, am able to make this person you took a detour for lie down obediently. As he finished speaking, Yingzhe's tone was filled with ruthlessness. Crush him. Chapter 499. Along with Yingzhe's low shout, the gazes of the group of young geniuses at the entrance of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy were filled with pity as they looked at Duan Lingtian. All of them felt that Duan Lingtian was about to be struck with misfortune. Roar! The snow leopard raised its head and roared explosively with a might that shook the heavens. Its enormous body moved as it charged towards Duan Lingtian, then it opened its bloody mouth and fiercely bit towards Duan Lingtian. The snow leopard was about to bite Duan Lingtian. Squeak! The fluffy golden fur on the little gold mouse that stood on Duan Lingtian's shoulder instantly stood on end, and it let out a sharp cry that was filled with extreme rage. Right at this moment, an unbelievable scene appeared. Everyone present was dumbstruck when they saw the scene before them. Some people even stretched out their hands to fiercely wipe their eyes, as if they were confirming that they weren't seeing things, along with the little gold mouse's sharp cry. The snow leopard that charged menacingly towards Duan Lingtian instantly stopped on the spot. In the next moment, the snow leopard's enormous body trembled, and it actually directly lay down on the ground and shivered. On the other hand, Yingzhe, who was on the snow leopard's back, was accidentally thrown off by the snow leopard, and he fell onto the ground in a sorry state. Roar! The snow leopard lay on the ground with its head tightly stuck to the ground, and it seemed as if it was a subject that was submitting to the emperor. Squeak squeak! The little gold mouse stood on Duan Lingtian's shoulder, and it raised its forelimbs like a human and proudly raised its head, as if it was a high and mighty emperor. As a demon beast, so long as it revealed its aura to a ferocious beast, it was sufficient to make the ferocious beast submit in fear. This scene caused everyone to be dumbstruck. A formidable ferocious beast, snow leopard, actually lay down before a pet mouse? It was simply unbelievable. When did snow leopards become so cowardly? Isn't that just a cute pet mouse? It only cried out once, yet the snow leopard was like a mouse that saw a cat, and it directly lay down? Humph! This snow leopard is really a disgrace to nascent soul-stage ferocious beasts. Many of the spectating young geniuses scoffed at snow leopard's reaction. Only Ji Feng and Sima Yang had heavy expressions, and their eyes were filled with fear when they looked at the little gold mouse on Duan Lingtian's shoulder. They knew that the little gold mouse standing on this young man's shoulder was absolutely not a pet mouse. What a joke! Could pet rats make the ferocious beasts under them restless? Earlier, when the little gold mouse emitted that cry that was directed towards the snow leopard, they'd all felt the restlessness of the ferocious beasts beneath them. If it wasn't for them placating the little gold mouse, the ferocious beasts beneath them would have probably already gone mad and fled. Ji Feng, you know him? Sima Yang looked at Ji Feng and asked via voice transmission. Obviously, he'd discerned that Ji Feng's actions earlier were entirely to induce Yingzhe step by step, to make Yingzhe lose his reason and make a move against that mysterious violet-clothed young man. Not really. I saw him at the restaurant an hour ago. Ji Feng shook his head and replied via voice transmission. At the same time, Ji Feng looked at Yingzhe, who had a dumbstruck expression and was staring blankly on the ground, and the corners of his mouth curled into a ridiculing smile once more as he added fuel to the fire. Sure enough, like master, like beast slave. Yingzhe, you should apologize to this young brother. In this way, perhaps he'll be magnanimous and forgive your rashness. Beast slave was the name the people of Cloud Continent gave to enslaved ferocious beasts and demon beasts. Of course, a demon beast like the little gold mouse that Duan Lingtian took to be a friend and wasn't enslaved by him couldn't be considered a beast slave. This Ji Feng, Duan Lingtian frowned, as he was able to discern that Ji Feng wished for the world to be plunged into chaos. As expected, he's a scheming person. Moreover, Duan Lingtian noticed that after Inja heard Ji Feng, he quickly recovered from his shock, and when he looked at Duan Lingtian, his eyes were filled with ruthlessness and shame. There are some people you can't afford to offend. When he saw Inja showing signs of flaring up, Duan Lingtian spoke indifferently. "Kid, you're courting death." Inja shouted out explosively, and his voice was filled with extreme rage. Swoosh! At the same time, Inja's figure shook, and he seemed to have transformed into a cannonball that directly charged towards Duan Lingtian. It wasn't just that, as Inja's figure flashed out, his right hand formed into a fist as his origin energy skyrocketed, and he flashed out with a target that directly pointed towards Duan Lingtian's chest. Whoosh! In the sky, 1,200 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form and dashed out along with Inja. Obviously, Inja had attacked out of extreme rage, and he'd exploded out with all his strength. Pig-headed. Duan Lingtian never imagined that after the snow leopard was intimidated to the point it lay down, Inja still dared attack him, and his face instantly sank as cold lights shot out from his eyes. At the same time that he shouted out coldly, Duan Lingtian moved. Tempest Point. With a raise of his hand, Duan Lingtian pointed out with his finger, and he didn't even use wind force or lightning force. Only a point force condensed from pure origin energy whistled out to intercept Inja's fist that approached menacingly. Swish! An ear-piercing howl abruptly sounded out. The point force that was condensed from the strength of 2,000 ancient mammoths easily broke open the origin energy on Inja's fist, and it easily touched Inja's fist. Poochie! Duan Lingtian's origin energy point force pierced into Inja's fist as if it had pierced into tofu. H! At the instant that a small hole was pierced on Inja's fist by the origin energy point force and fresh blood splattered out, Inja's shrill cry sounded out, and it was extremely miserable. Subsequently, Inja stretched out his other hand and tightly held onto his right hand that was dripping with blood. At this moment, Inja's body shivered as cold sweat flowed out. No! Impossible! Inja ceaselessly shook his head as he looked at the 2,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes that gradually dispersed above Duan Lingtian, and he wasn't willing to believe that all this was true. This young man that looked to be not more than 25 years old was actually a first-level void prying stage expert. After Inja, who'd used his origin energy to stop the bleeding with great difficulty and had an extremely pale countenance, clearly noticed his injuries, his face went grim and became exceedingly savage. You crippled my hand, you crippled my hand. The Yin clan won't let you off, the Yin clan won't let you off. Inja's voice contained traces of trembling mixed within, because he noticed that his right hand was completely crippled. Duan Lingtian's origin energy point force had easily crippled 2 of his finger bones, and it didn't lose momentum in the slightest as it drilled into his arm bones and completely minced his bone marrow. Now, even if he had a grade 4 great recovery pill, it was impossible for his hand to recover. Duan Lingtian's gaze was calm when faced with Inja, who had a savage and warped expression, and he said indifferently, "Before you made a move, I'd already told you. There are some people you can't afford to offend. If you offend them, then you have to pay the price." You! Inja's face flushed red, and only now did he recall that Duan Lingtian had indeed said this. But at that time, he was furious to the extreme, so how could he possibly listen to Duan Lingtian? He only thought that Duan Lingtian was deliberately mystifying him. You're dead, you're dead. Inja glanced hatefully at Duan Lingtian, then he leaped onto the back of the snow leopard that lay on the ground, and he looked at the snow leopard and shouted coldly. Get up! Do you think you haven't lost enough face? But the snow leopard utterly paid no attention to him, and it lay on the ground by itself as it shivered when facing the aura of a demon beast emitted by the little gold mouse. Useless trash! Inja's expression was unsightly to the extreme when he saw the snow leopard paying no attention to him, and he raised his left hand to reveal a spirit saber. Own! The spirit saber descended and directly pierced into the snow leopard's head, killing it. Perhaps, even until its death, the snow leopard never imagined that its owner would suddenly kill it. I won't let you off. Absolutely not. Inja once again used a vicious gaze to glance at Duan Lingtian. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed into a highly venomous crimson serpent that chose its target to devour. Subsequently, Inja's figure flashed out to leave the entrance of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy, and he vanished at the end of the road. Obviously, he'd returned to the Yin clan. Duan Lingtian paid no attention to Inja's threat. Yin clan. In the past, the 5 great sects reigned supreme in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, and besides the imperial family of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, there wasn't a single clan that could compare with any one of the 5 great sections. Presently, 2 of the 5 great sects had been annihilated successively, and the remaining 3 great sects had merged into one to form a formidable power that wasn't inferior to the imperial family, Azure Forest Trisect. The Azure Forest Trisect undoubtedly wished for nothing more than to eliminate Duan Lingtian, the surviving member of the 7-Star Sword sect, as soon as possible. Duan Lingtian daring to stand here today represented that he was mentally prepared to face the Azure Forest Trisect. He wasn't even afraid of the Azure Forest Trisect, so would he be afraid of a Yin clan? After Inja left, Duan Lingtian returned to his senses and intended to line up to register. Presently, everywhere Duan Lingtian passed, all the young geniuses moved aside, and in the end, they moved him to the front and allowed him to register first. No matter where an expert went, they were able to obtain the respect of others and obtain some special privileges. Chapter 500. Under the gazes of everyone present, Duan Lingtian walked step by step to arrive before a stone table at the entrance of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. Senior. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian noticed that the old man behind the stone table was looking at him with a dumbstruck expression, and he couldn't help but remind him. The old man reacted, and only now did he realize that he'd lost his composure, and his face went red as he stretched out his hand. Kid, your proof of recommendation. Presently, after the old man witnessed Duan Lingtian's cultivation, his tone became slightly more courteous. Senior, this is my proof of recommendation. Duan Lingtian raised his hand and withdrew a proof from his spatial ring, and it was precisely the proof that the Crimson Sky Kingdom's emperor gave him that day. The old man received the proof from Duan Lingtian. Some of the surrounding young geniuses couldn't help but gather over, and their gazes shot straight at the proof of recommendation that was gradually unfolding in the old man's hand. Even the group of young geniuses in the outer area had curious expressions. I wonder which power he's from. Ji Feng's eyes squinted, and he was filled with curiosity towards Duan Lingtian's identity in his heart. At this moment, Sima Yang was also watching the scene in front of him with great interest. He was similarly curious. Crimson Sky Kingdom. You're from the Crimson Sky Kingdom. Finally, the old man found out about Duan Lingtian's origins from the proof of recommendation that Duan Lingtian passed over, and he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Crimson Sky Kingdom. Although the old man's voice wasn't loud, it seemed to be especially clear under the silent atmosphere in the surroundings. He's from the Crimson Sky Kingdom. I know of the Crimson Sky Kingdom. It's one of the numerous kingdoms under our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, and I've never heard of any outstanding figures appearing from it in the recent years. I never imagined that such a monstrous genius would appear this time. A small kingdom is able to give birth to such a terrifying genius martial artist? Unbelievable. I thought earlier that he was someone from a hidden power of our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. After the surrounding group of young geniuses found out about Duan Lingtian's origins, at the same time that they sighed with emotion, they couldn't help but be slightly disappointed. Duan Lingtian's origins were slightly different from what they'd imagined. After all, the shock that Duan Lingtian had given them was too great. His cultivation had already stepped into the void-prying stage at such a young age. In terms of natural talent, he was even not inferior to the most outstanding 5 great young masters of the younger generation of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. So you're just someone from a small kingdom. Ji Feng's brows raised as he thought of something. Looks like I was too sensitive. However, even if he is from a small kingdom, with such talent, he is bound to achieve great things in the future. Such a person should only be a friend, not an enemy. People from a small kingdom. Sima Yang was a little surprised. Soon, the crowd fell into a deathly silence. The old man, who was reading the certificate that Duan Lingtian handed to him, spoke again. You're called Duan Lingtian? The old man's voice was filled with shock and astonishment. Duan Lingtian. When this name was called out by the old man, the atmosphere at the scene fell silent for a moment. Then, like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, it became completely lively. Duan Lingtian? Isn't Duan Lingtian the peerless genius of the Seven-Star Sword Sect? Supposedly, when the Seven-Star Sword Sect was annihilated, the higher-ups of the Seven-Star Sword Sect risked their lives to send that Duan Lingtian out, and they took him to be the future hope of the Seven-Star Sword Sect. No matter how audacious the members of the Azure Forest Trisect are, they wouldn't dare directly touch you in the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. The old man's tone was serious, and his words were filled with confidence towards the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. The Dragon and Phoenix Academy was an academy that was specially set up by the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's imperial family for the sake of the martial competition of the 10 dynasties, and it received the protection of the imperial family. Even though the Azure Forest Trisect was formidable like the sun in the midday sky. But before the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's imperial family, it was still insufficient. Only because the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's imperial family had an expert at the 7th level of the Void Initiation stage or above, yet the Azure Forest Trisect didn't. Thank you for your reminder, Senior. Duan Lingtian's heart felt warm when he heard the old man, and he received the command token before walking into the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. Not long after he passed through the arched door and entered the Dragon and Phoenix Academy, a middle-aged man came over to greet him right away, and the middle-aged man glanced indifferently at Duan Lingtian. Wait a moment. This middle-aged man had a wooden expression, and his tone was extremely cold and indifferent. Obviously, he didn't know what had happened outside the academy earlier and didn't know Duan Lingtian's identity. Otherwise, it would probably be difficult for him to maintain such composure. Duan Lingtian nodded and waited on the spot. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian saw two people walking over side by side, and it was precisely Ji Feng and Sima Yang. The three of them gathered together in next to no time. You three newcomers, follow me. The middle-aged man called out to Duan Lingtian's group of three before walking into the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. I truly never imagined that so you're that peerless genius of the 7-Star Sword Sect, Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian followed behind the middle-aged man when a voice that was filled with emotion suddenly sounded out by his ears. It was precisely Sima Yang who lightly smiled as he spoke to Duan Lingtian. Peerless genius? Duan Lingtian shook his head. I can't be considered to be a peerless genius. Cloud Continent is so huge. Not to mention the foreign lands, even if it's within the Darkhan dynasty, there are numerous people that are able to obtain accomplishments that surpass me at my age. The middle-aged man that led the way ahead revealed slight surprise in his eyes when he heard Sima Yang, and he even glanced deeply at Duan Lingtian. When he heard Duan Lingtian's words that were neither haughty nor humble, he couldn't help but nod to himself. Not arrogant nor rash, he's indeed a good sapling. Darkhan dynasty. Sima Yang's face froze when he heard Duan Lingtian, and he laughed bitterly. I didn't compare you with the geniuses of the Darkhan dynasty. In the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, your natural talent is indeed already considered to be a peerless genius. Darkhan dynasty. Sima Yang knew his own limitations. Perhaps, he would have the chance to become eminent in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom and obtain the opportunity to head to the Darkstone Empire to compete with the young geniuses of the various imperial kingdoms, but it was practically impossible for him to become eminent in the Darkstone Empire. Not to mention the young geniuses of the Darkhan dynasty, he didn't even dare compare himself with the young geniuses of the Darkstone Empire. Duan Lingtian shook his head and didn't say anything further. Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. He'd never thought of staying in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom for his entire lifetime, so it was impossible for him to not compare himself with those geniuses in the martial Dao outside. Oh. Sima Yang, Duan Lingtian's gaze is different from ours. Our gazes are fixed on the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, and we'd rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. Whereas Duan Lingtian possesses monstrous natural talent, and he'll sooner or later walk out of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom to wander in the wider world. Ji Feng laughed loudly, and his words seemed to be able to see through Duan Lingtian's thoughts. This caused Duan Lingtian to be unable to help but think slightly higher of Ji Feng. Sima Yang laughed embarrassedly when he heard this. It's me who's too short-sighted. Right at this moment, the middle-aged man that led the way spoke out slowly. After all of you enter the Dragon and Phoenix Academy, all of you must abide by the rules of the Academy. In the following year, besides when the Academy issues assignments to all of you and tempering all of you can leave. At other times, all of you only have one chance to leave every month, and all of you are free to choose. Once you violate the rules, you'll be expelled from the Academy and lose the qualifications to participate in the Genius competition 1 year from now. As soon as the middle-aged man finished speaking, Ji Feng and Sima Yang revealed bitter smiles, as they never imagined that there would be such a rule. Duan Lingtian's brows raised, and he didn't mind. To him, his goal was to become eminent in the Genius competition held by the Dragon and Phoenix Academy 1 year from now and win the opportunity to head to the Darkstone Empire to compete with the young geniuses of the Darkstone Empire and even the young geniuses of the various imperial kingdoms. With a glance, they saw a building that was similar to a sentry tower standing in the distance in this bumpy area, and there was an exquisite little house on top of it. Compared to this towering exquisite house, the tattered tent on this bumpy area was simply like a beggar's residence. For a moment, Ji Feng and Sima Yang's eyes went red as they stared fixedly at the towering exquisite house. Although this house was far inferior to the house they lived in at home, compared to the tattered tent, it was simply like heaven. Only Duan Lingtian's gaze descended onto the figure in front of the exquisite house. This was an old man. The old man wore gray clothes, his face was stiff, and a trace of fierceness was emitted from between his brows. I'm the Vice Dean of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy, Qi Ming. You can call me Vice Dean Qi, the gray-clothed old man spoke indifferently. Vice Dean Qi. When they heard that the old man was actually the Vice Dean of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy, Duan Lingtian and the other two were shocked and hurriedly bowed. Ji Feng and Sima Yang bowed. As for Duan Lingtian, he only nodded. This scene caused the old man to take a few more glances at Duan Lingtian. Since you've entered the Dragon and Phoenix Academy, you must abide by the Academy's rules. The old man indifferently swept Duan Lingtian and the other two with his gaze, then slowly said, I presume that when all of you arrived, someone already told all of you of the rules that all of you must abide by in the Dragon and Phoenix Academy for this year. Now, I'll tell all of you of the other two rules. As he spoke up to hear, the old man's originally muddy eyes abruptly became fierce, and he said in a low voice, Firstly, in our Dragon and Phoenix Academy, different people enjoy different treatment. These tents around you are the residences that the Academy has allocated to all of you, and all of you are not allowed to arbitrarily change them. Otherwise, the Academy will expel all of you one by one. Not allowed to arbitrarily change them. Duan Lingtian's brows raised, as he was able to understand the meaning behind the old man's words. If there wasn't this rule, after the students of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy stayed here, they would surely impatiently want to leave the Academy and go out to purchase various things that could improve their living conditions. After all the people that were able to be recommended to the Dragon and Phoenix Academy were young geniuses from all over the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. All of these people were proud geniuses of the heavens in their respective powers, and when had they suffered such hardships? Yet now, this rule was set, and it dispelled the thoughts of everyone that wanted to change their living conditions. The old man's words sounded out, and Ji Feng and Sima Yang glanced at each other with bitter smiles on their faces. A similar thought had arisen in their minds earlier, but who knew that it would be directly rejected by the rules of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy? What lousy rule! The two of them couldn't help but curse in their hearts. Vice Dean Qi, I wonder what you mean by, different people enjoy different treatment? Duan Lingtian asked. This, you'll know in a moment. The old man didn't explain and continued. Second, the students of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy can fight, but they can't harm the lives of others or even cause them to be crippled. Otherwise, they will be expelled from the academy as well. Duan Lingtian wasn't surprised by this. The Dragon and Phoenix Academy had the responsibility to protect the safety of any young genius that was recommended to enter the academy. Now, all of you go find an empty tent to stay in. After the old man finished speaking, he didn't pay any further attention to Duan Lingtian's group of three. Duan Lingtian shook his head and took the lead to leave to look for an empty tent. Presently, the pile of tents that remained were even more tattered than the other tents. The good ones had already been taken away. I really don't know what the imperial family is thinking. Making such a lousy place for us to stay in. If I lack money, I'm completely capable of using my own money to build an independent courtyard. Sima Yang's tone was filled with complaint. I presume there's some other purpose behind all this. Ji Feng frowned and guessed. What other purpose could there be? Sima Yang grunted. In a short while, Duan Lingtian's group of three found their own tents. The three tents weren't far from each other. The tents were extremely small, and when one opened the tent, one could see that there were many cockroaches and cockroach feces inside. Just looking at it caused one to feel disgusted and unable to accept it. F***K. What kind of lousy place is this? Can people even stay here? Sima Yang, who had just stretched out his hand to open the tent, went pale and closed the tent once more. At this moment, many more people came over and chose their own tents one by one. The expressions of these people were unsightly, and many of them couldn't help but grumble. It's time to eat. A resounding voice suddenly sounded out. He saw a few middle-aged men carrying a few large plates over in large strides. On the plates were some rice that was so thin that the rice couldn't be seen, and there was also a moldy steamed bun, a bowl of rice soup and a steamed bun. Duan Lingtian received his food with an astounded expression. If he couldn't even eat his fill, how would he cultivate? I'll endure living in this lousy place. Are these things for people to eat? Sima Yang, who had an unsightly expression, finally exploded. He raised his hand and threw the rice and steamed bun that were so thin that the rice couldn't be seen on the ground. Ji Feng frowned as well. Since he was young, when had he ever eaten such food? Although Duan Lingtian felt that it was slightly inconceivable, he didn't feel that it was anything. Perhaps the Dragon and Phoenix Academy was tempering them. Just when Duan Lingtian was about to eat the steamed bun and drink the rice soup, another few middle-aged men appeared before Duan Lingtian and the others. These middle-aged men had also come to deliver food. However, the plates in their hands were filled with fragrant rice, and there were also various fine wine and delicacies that caused one to drool. Eating these is more like it. After Sima Yang and Ji Feng saw these dishes, their expressions eased up. However, they were quickly dumbstruck again. They saw these middle-aged men carrying these sumptuous dishes directly walk past their area and head inside. There was a large door that led to another area. These dishes aren't for us to eat. Sima Yang's face went grim, and his figure flashed out to stop a middle-aged man that was carrying fine wine and delicacies. Then he said in a deep voice, "What's the meaning of this? You're giving us rice soup and moldy steamed buns, yet others have fine wine and delicacies?" The middle-aged man glanced indifferently at Sima Yang. "If you have the ability, you can replace them as well. So long as you enter the inner hall, you'll naturally be able to enjoy the same treatment." After he finished speaking, the middle-aged man paid no further attention to Sima Yang and passed through the large door ahead to enter another area. Inner hall. The middle-aged man's words caused the group of young geniuses that had just entered the Dragon and Phoenix Academy, including Duan Lingtian, Sima Yang, and Ji Feng, to have bewildered expressions. Before long, Duan Lingtian and the others couldn't help but follow. Chapter 502. Presently, what appeared before the eyes of Duan Lingtian and the others was an area paved with luxurious limestone bricks. On this limestone brick area, 10 spacious and luxurious courtyards stood there in an orderly manner. Every courtyard had a spacious house, and the lawn outside the houses was filled with flowers and plants that emitted the fragrance of flowers. Compared to the area Duan Lingtian and the others were currently at, this area was simply like another world. They followed the few middle-aged men in to deliver food. Young geniuses walked out successively from the 10 courtyards and received the fine wine and delicacies before returning to their courtyards to eat and drink. Isn't the person in the innermost courtyard the crazy young master, Luo Zhan? Suddenly, an exclaim of surprise sounded out by Duan Lingtian's ears. Crazy young master? Duan Lingtian's brows raised. Although he'd never seen this crazy young master in the past, Duan Lingtian had heard of him since long ago. Crazy young master, the head of the 5 great young masters of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. In terms of strength and natural talent, he was at the top amongst the 5 great young masters. Luo Zhan, Sima Yang and Ji Feng, who were by Duan Lingtian's side, successively recognized crazy young master Luo Zhan. Not only that, they recognized quite a few of the young geniuses that occupied the other 9 courtyards as well. What's going on? Why is their treatment so good, yet our treatment so bad? Sima Yang's expression was gloomy, and his voice was incomparably chilly. Perhaps, this is what Vice Dean Qi meant when he said, different people enjoy different treatment. Duan Lingtian's brows raised as he spoke slowly. The nearby Ji Feng couldn't help but nod in agreement to Duan Lingtian's words. Exactly. All of us that were recommended to the Dragon and Phoenix Academy will be brought to the outer hall to live in a place that stinks to the heavens, sleep in extremely tattered palms, and eat rice soup that can't see the rice and moldy mantus. Whereas if we want to change our current situation, there's only one way, and that is to enter the inner hall. A young genius from the outer hall walked forward and successfully attracted the attention of Duan Lingtian and the others. Before he continued, as you can see, the treatment of the inner hall is completely different from that of the outer hall. In the inner hall, not only is the living environment the best, every meal is served with fine wine and delicacies. And if you want to enter the inner hall and live in these luxurious courtyards, there's only one way. That is to defeat a young genius from one of the courtyards in the inner hall and replace him. In this way, the young genius that wins the challenge will be able to obtain the treatment of the person he defeated. He will be able to live in a comfortable and luxurious house and eat the best wine and delicacies. This young genius from the outer hall finished speaking in one breath. As he spoke, his face was filled with envy. In this way, those people that are still unable to stay in the inner hall after a year. Even if the genius competition begins, it would be practically impossible for them to obtain the qualifications to head to the Darkstone Empire's imperial city and approach the martial competition of the 10 dynasties. Suddenly, someone said aloud. You can say that. The young genius from the outer hall nodded, and then his eyes shone brightly. So, I've set a goal for myself now. I must work hard to break through in this year and strive to win a place in the inner hall. Presently, the weakest person in the inner hall is in existence at the 9th level of the nascent soul stage or above. This is still because not everyone has arrived. In these few days, the young geniuses recommended by the various powers of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom will gather together. At that time, those without a cultivation at the half-step void stage or above will probably find it difficult to gain a foothold in the inner hall. When they heard this, the group of people by Duan Lingtian's side, including Ji Feng and Sima Yang, had serious expressions, and all of them deeply agreed. In this way, So long as I'm able to defeat any one of them, I'll be able to replace them, live in their courtyards, and enjoy the fine wine and delicacies that they're enjoying now. Sima Yang's eyes shone brightly as his figure flashed out to charge through the door and enter the inner hall area. He intended to directly issue a challenge and replace one of the young geniuses in the inner hall. During mealtime and sleeping time, you're not allowed to issue a challenge. Right at this moment, a voice that was filled with energy sounded out from behind everyone, and it entered into Sima Yang's ears at the same time, causing Sima Yang to be unable to help but stop moving. It was precisely the voice of the Vice Dean of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy, Qi Ming. Presently, Qi Ming stood outside the exquisite house that was like a watchtower, and his gaze was sharp as he took in everything in the outer hall and inner hall. Looks like this Vice Dean Qi is staying here. To a certain extent, he's monitoring everything in the inner hall and outer hall. If anyone violates the rules, I'm afraid that person will be dragged out by him in a short moment. Duan Lingtian looked at the old man and thought in his heart. Then we'll wait for them to finish eating. Sima Yang retreated. Meanwhile, the group of young geniuses in the outer hall heard that someone wanted to challenge a member of the inner hall, and they'd finished eating the rice soup and moldy mantus in their hands before leaving their respective tents and walking over to join in the fun. Slap! A clear sound of shattering sounded out, and it was a bowl filled with rice soup that had been smashed onto the ground. Along with it was a moldy mantus that had been smashed onto the ground. For a time, the gazes of the members of the outer hall present descended onto Duan Lingtian. It was precisely Duan Lingtian who'd thrown away the rice soup and moldy mantus in his hand. I originally thought that everyone would receive the same treatment. But now it would seem that it isn't so. Since it's like this, there's no need for me to eat these things. Duan Lingtian thought in his heart, and his sharp gaze descended onto the inner hall. Slap! Right at this moment, Sima Yang smashed the bowl that contained the rice soup and moldy mantus in his hand onto the ground before fiercely stomping them flat. I fucking won't eat these lousy things. I fucking want to eat fine wine and delicacies. I'll join as well. Ji Feng shook his head and smiled before smashing the bowl and mantus in his hand. This caused the group of young geniuses in the outer hall to sigh. So it's the Ji clan's Ji Feng and the Sima clan's Sima Yang. No wonder they're so confident and dare directly smash the rice soup and mantus. Ji Feng, Sima Yang. They're the figures in our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom whose natural talent is only inferior to the 5 great young masters? Exactly. It's them. With their strength, I presume it isn't difficult for them to occupy a place in the inner hall. Some of the young geniuses in the outer hall recognized Ji Feng and Sima Yang, and they sighed with emotion. I'm not surprised that Ji Feng and Sima Yang are confident. But this violet-clothed young man was the first to smash the rice soup and mantus, and he seems to be extremely confident as well. This young man looks to be not more than 25. Even if he takes good care of himself, it ought to be impossible for him to be more than 30. I've never heard of such a figure in the younger generation of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. He smashed the rice soup and mantus. If he's unable to enter the inner hall, he'll have to starve for a meal. Many young geniuses in the outer hall couldn't help but shake their heads, and they didn't look favorably upon Duan Lingtian. These people were all people that had arrived at the Dragon and Phoenix Academy since early in the morning. Presently, there were many young geniuses that had just entered the Dragon and Phoenix Academy today, and all of them had expressions of disdain when they heard what these people said. These people actually dared to look down upon Duan Lingtian? Now, they were slightly anticipating how shocked these people would be when they witnessed Duan Lingtian's strength and found out about Duan Lingtian's identity. They tacitly didn't speak of Duan Lingtian's identity and didn't refute these people. Because they knew that there was no need for them to refute. Duan Lingtian would use his actions to prove everything. At this moment, even Ji Feng and Sima Yang tacitly didn't speak of Duan Lingtian's identity, and they obviously had similar thoughts. These fellows are eating so slowly. Sima Yang frowned and had an impatient expression. Looking at others drinking fine wine and tasting fine delicacies while standing here and starving was a feeling that caused one to feel extremely displeased. Finally, within the 10 courtyards in the inner hall, there was a young man around the age of 30 that was the first to finish sweeping up the fine wine and delicacies, and then he stood up. His ridiculing gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian and the others as he grinned. "Is there anyone that wants to challenge me, Chai Jin?" Chai Jin. As soon as the young man spoke, Duan Lingtian noticed that the expressions of Ji Feng, Sima Yang, and many other outer hall young geniuses went pale. The outer hall young geniuses that didn't go pale were all people that had entered the Dragon and Phoenix Academy long ago, and the reason they weren't surprised was because they knew of the existence of Chai Jin since long ago. Chai Jin. Duan Lingtian saw that even Ji Feng and Sima Yang had lost their composure, and under his curiosity, his spiritual force swept out to envelop Chai Jin. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian found out the reason the expressions of Ji Feng and the others went pale. This Chai Jin is actually a first-level void prying stage martial artist. Duan Lingtian was slightly surprised. A first-level void prying stage martial artist a little over 30, such natural talent was able to compare with figures like the 5 great young masters. It's Chai Jin, the #1 genius of the Black Fiend sect. Supposedly, this Chai Jin had only risen in the Black Fiend sect in recent years, and had always been unknown to the public. In terms of natural talent, he's even not inferior to any one of the 5 great young masters of our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Supposedly, this Chai Jin had already broken through to the first level of the void prying stage half a year ago. The crowd of outer hall disciples discussed animatedly. These discussions were heard by Duan Lingtian, and it caused Duan Lingtian's face to go pale. Black Fiend sect? This sect was something he'd never forget in his entire lifetime. The Black Fiend sect, the sect that had once annihilated the Boundless sect, there wasn't any connection between the Boundless sect and Duan Lingtian, and Duan Lingtian didn't care when the Boundless sect was annihilated by the Black Fiend sect. What Duan Lingtian truly cared about was the scene of his dignity being trampled upon by the Black Fiend sect's elder in the misty forest outside Aurora City. Everything that happened at that time was something he couldn't forget for his entire lifetime. He still remembered. That Black Fiend sect's elder was called Sun Rui. Sima, didn't you despise them for taking so long to eat a meal? Now that someone has finished eating, do you want to challenge him? Ji Feng looked at Sima Yang, and his eyes narrowed as he smiled. Sima Yang rolled his eyes at Ji Feng. If you're able, then you go. You clearly know that he's a first-level void prying stage martial artist, yet I go up, wouldn't that be looking for abuse? I challenge you. Chapter 503. Along with this cold and low shout resounded out. Everyone present, including Duan Lingtian, looked at the person that spoke. This was a white-robed young man with a face like jade, slanted brows, starry eyes, and an elegant bearing. Most striking of all was the sheathed sword he carried on his back. After all, practically all the young geniuses present didn't have a spatial ring, so there were very few people that carried weapons with them. Whereas this white-robed young man didn't seem to be a person that couldn't afford a spatial ring no matter how one looked at it. Sword Young Master. Right when Duan Lingtian was still wondering about this person's identity, an abrupt voice sounded out, causing Duan Lingtian to feel as if he was jolted awake from a dream. Sword Young Master. The person that was ranked 4th amongst the 5 great young masters of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom? A member of the Origin Convergence sect. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian recalled the other identity of the Sword Young Master, and his face couldn't help but sink. The Origin Convergence sect had merged with the other 2 great sects to form the Azure Forest Trisect now, and although it only existed in name, the sect still existed. Most importantly, when the 7-star sword sect was annihilated that day, the Origin Convergence sect bore the brunt of the annihilation and was the greatest enemy of the 7-star sword sect. I never expected that the Sword Young Master would come as well. The appearance of the Sword Young Master had successfully raised the atmosphere of the scene, and some of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy's outer hall students even looked at the Sword Young Master with expressions of adoration. Sword Young Master, Qin Shao Shui. One of the 5 great young masters of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Many years ago, he'd become renowned in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom with the 3-foot-long blade in his hand, and he was publicly acknowledged as an outstanding talent in the younger generation of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. First level of the Void Prying stage. Duan Lingtian's spiritual force stretched out and noticed the Sword Young Master's current cultivation at the first possible moment, and he couldn't help but be slightly surprised. With a quick thought, he came to an understanding. Although the Sword Young Master's ranking amongst the 5 great young masters was still below the Zither Young Master, the Zither Young Master had already stepped into the half-step Void stage over a year ago. It wasn't strange that this Sword Young Master's current cultivation had stepped into the Void Prying stage. Perhaps it was because of the hostile relationship between the 7-Star Sword Sect and the Origin Convergence Sect, but Duan Lingtian faintly aroused slight hostility towards this Sword Young Master. Suddenly, Sword Young Master seemed to have noticed Duan Lingtian's hostility, and his gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian. I saw you at the entrance of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy earlier. You're the 7-Star Sword Sect's Duan Lingtian. If you're dissatisfied with me because of the Gue Yuan sect, then you don't have to. An indifferent voice transmission was transmitted into Duan Lingtian's ears. Now that the Gue Yuan sect no longer exists, I am also no longer a disciple of the Gue Yuan sect. The Gue Yuan clan no longer exists. Duan Lingtian was able to discern that this voice transmission belonged to Sword Young Master. Duan Lingtian frowned slightly when he heard Sword Young Master, and he couldn't help but ask via voice transmission. What do you mean by this? All those years ago, I was tricked into entering the Gue Yuan sect by an old fellow. I'd once promised him that I would be a disciple of the Gue Yuan sect for my entire lifetime. But now that the Gue Yuan sect no longer exists, my promise from that day is naturally void. Sword Young Master started to gnash his teeth slightly in his voice transmission, and later on, there was slight willful relief. It was as if the Gue Yuan sect no longer existed was a good thing to him. He'd recovered his freedom. Whether you're a disciple of the Gue Yuan sect or not is unrelated to me. All I know is that if you obstruct me when I'm seeking revenge for the Azure Forest Trisect for the 7-Star Sword Sect, then you'll be my, Duan Lingtian's, enemy if you obstruct me. Duan Lingtian glanced deeply at Sword Young Master, and his tone was terrifyingly calm. Sword Young Master's figure stopped when he heard this, and he glanced deeply at Duan Lingtian before a wisp of a calm smile appeared on the corners of his mouth, and he said via voice transmission, the rise and fall of the Azure Forest Trisect is completely unrelated to me. Not to mention, I'm not to the extent of looking for trouble for myself. Perhaps the greatest mistake of the Azure Forest Trisect when it annihilated the 7-Star Sword Sect was allowing you to escape. Sword Young Master spoke extremely highly of Duan Lingtian, and he seemed to believe that Duan Lingtian possessed the ability to take revenge for the 7-Star Sword Sect. This caused Duan Lingtian to be rather surprised. Sword Young Master. Sword Young Master. Sword Young Master walked over slowly, and the crowd of outer hall students that blocked the entrance to the outer hall and inner hall opened up a path, and many people greeted him humbly. Ji Feng and Sima Yang silently looked at Sword Young Master, and their eyes contained slight fear mixed within. Even though they were renowned in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom's Imperial City, they were greatly inferior when compared to figures like Sword Young Master that were like the 5 great young masters. It was even to the extent that they were suppressed by the 5 great young masters to a certain extent. They were suppressed to the point they were unable to catch their breaths. Sword Young Master passed through the entrance and entered the inner hall. Whereas now, the Black Fiend sect's genius disciple, Chai Jin, slowly walked out from the inner hall, and his eyes were filled with battle intent as he looked at Sword Young Master. I've long heard that Sword Young Master is the one and only sword cultivator amongst the 5 great young masters. Today, Chai Jin wants to properly experience your strength and see if Sword Young Master's reputation is undeserved. Make a move. I haven't eaten yet. Sword Young Master had a calm expression as he spoke with slight impatience. Sword Young Master's words caused the corners of the surrounding outer hall students to be unable to refrain from twitching. They were naturally able to discern the meaning within Sword Young Master's words. It was none other than firmly believing that Chai Jin would lose at his hands, whereas he would replace Chai Jin and make the members of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy prepare fine wine and delicacies for him. This was the treatment of an inner hall student of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. Looks like Sword Young Master is extremely confident of himself. Chai Jin's face sank when he heard Sword Young Master, and with a raise of his hand, a 3-foot-long blade appeared in his hand. Since it's like this, then let me experience Sword Young Master's ability. As soon as Chai Jin finished speaking, he moved. Whoosh! Chai Jin's figure shook, and he seemed to have transformed into a bolt of lightning that flashed directly towards Sword Young Master. In the sky, 2,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. Swish! Origin energy raged on the 3-foot-long blade in Chai Jin's hand, and sword lights tore through the sky to transform into specks of starlight that enveloped down towards Sword Young Master without leaving any opening. Right at this moment, another 760 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared beside the 2,000 ancient mammoth silhouettes in the sky. Obviously, the 3-foot-long blade in Chai Jin's hand was a grade 6 spirit sword. The might of a single sword strike contained the strength of 2,760 ancient mammoths. The Black Fiend Sect Starpoint Sword Technique? Not bad. But unfortunately, you haven't comprehended sword force, so it's unable to show off in the end. When he saw Chai Jin's sword flashing over, Sword Young Master spoke with a calm expression. At the instant he spoke, Sword Young Master stood on the spot, and with a raise of his hand, the spirit sword on his back instantly left its sheath. In the sky, 2,760 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared as well. In the next moment. Swish! Sword Young Master's sword was swift like a bolt of lightning. When his sword struck out, he didn't even utilize a sword skill, and only used the pure basic sword move, piercing sword style. You're courting death. Chai Jin's expression was unsightly to the extreme from being looked down upon by Sword Young Master, and with a raise of his hand, the speed of the sword in his hand became even swifter. Swish! 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 The specks of starlight descended like an array of stars that covered the sky, and they formed a heaven-encompassing net that enveloped Sword Young Master. Sword Young Master's gaze was calm, and his origin energy suddenly shook on the sword that swiftly flashed out. In the next moment, a peerlessly fierce aura was born from within the origin energy, and it suffused out as it raged and leaped about. At the same time, another 500 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared out of thin air beside the 2,760 ancient mammoth silhouettes in the sky above Sword Young Master. Instantly, 3,260 ancient mammoth silhouettes dashed out. Half-step advanced sword force. Duan Ling Tian was the first to react, and his face squinted as his heart shook, and his eyes contained slight shock mixed within. First level of the void prying stage, comprehending half-step advanced sword force? This comprehension ability was shocking. Practically at the instant Duan Ling Tian reacted, the Vice Dean of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy, Qi Ming, exclaimed in shock from outside the exquisite little house that was like a watchtower. Half-step advanced sword force. Qi Ming didn't intentionally suppress his voice, and it caused the group of outer hall students to feel as if they were awakening from a dream. Half-step advanced sword force. Right when the group of outer hall students looked at each other. Swish! The sword in Sword Young Master's hand seemed as if it was assisted by the gods, and at this moment, it seemed to have transformed into a stroke of genius that pointed towards Chai Jin's hand that held the sword. In the next moment. Clang! The sound of iron weapons colliding sounded out. Subsequently, everyone saw the space between Chai Jin's thumb and index finger split open and dripped with blood, and the grade 6 spirit sword in his hand flew out to fiercely smash onto the ground. Thank you for letting me win. Sword Young Master sheathed his sword and stood there, then nodded indifferently towards Chai Jin. After that, he looked towards the few middle-aged men who stood nearby with sluggish divine abilities. They were the staff of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy. "Help me prepare food." One of the middle-aged men nodded, then walked out with large strides to hastily prepare. After Sword Young Master nodded to Duan Lingtian, he turned around and entered the courtyard that belonged to Chai Jin. He defeated the inner hall student, Chai Jin, and kicked Chai Jin out of the inner hall. Whereas Chai Jin had been reduced to an outer hall student. If he wanted to become an inner hall student once more, he could only issue a challenge once more. But at this moment, Chai Jin obviously didn't have the mood to issue a challenge for now, and he stood on the spot with a dumbstruck expression. Sword Young Master's strength had given him too great of a shock. First level of the Void Prime stage, half-step advanced sword force. This comprehension ability was sufficient to cause the other 5 great young masters to pale in comparison. I truly never imagined that Sword Young Master has actually comprehended half-step advanced sword force. Comprehending such a sword force with such a cultivation. Sword Young Master's comprehension ability is probably considered to be at the top amongst the 5 great young masters. Even the head of the 5 great young masters, the crazy young master, Luo Zhan, has only comprehended elementary fire force. The crowd of outer hall students couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Even if it was the other inner hall students, they had shocked expressions now. "All of you have finished eating, right?" Sima Yang quickly recovered from his shock, then walked directly into the inner hall and challenged one of the inner hall students. Sima Yang, that inner hall student knew Sima Yang and knew that he wasn't a match for Sima Yang, so he directly admitted defeat. "Go prepare fish and meat for me." Sima Yang smiled with satisfaction, then he looked at the staff of the Dragon and Phoenix Academy as he spoke. "You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.